Alright everybody, I have a never before seen concept for you. You know those two Mario RPGs that we got? What if we add Luigi? The year is 2003 and the Game Boy Advance is well into its life cycle, and shockingly enough there is no original Mario game in sight. Yeah, we got a couple of quality ports here or there, but nothing in terms of a brand new adventure starring the portly plumber. Despite that, Nintendo insisted on constantly giving us the same version of Mario Bros across multiple games. Why did you do this? I don't understand. And that is where newcomers Alpha Dream come in, developing an RPG featuring not only Mario but his lesser known brother, Green Mario. You gotta remember here, at this point Luigi getting a headline role was kind of a big deal. Luigi's Mansion was the first time he was more than the typecast player too. We don't count Mario as missing in this house. So the idea of not only playing as Luigi, but both brothers at the same time in a brand new adventure? Well boy howdy, sign me up. It's also the game that added striped socks to Luigi's canon, so that's good to know.
Nintendo!
Classic. Alpha Dream is, of course, known for this series, but at the time, these devs didn't really have much under their belt. They made Hamtaro Rainbow Rescue for GBA. That's cool. Not the first and probably not the last time I'll bring up these Hamtaro games on this channel, I swear. But more interesting, Tomato Adventure. I don't really know much about it, but it looks very similar to what they would go on to work on soon after. And that's good enough for me. It's an RPG that never left Japan, will probably never get any recognition from Nintendo ever again, and will be quite a while before a fan translation is completed so I can understand why tomatoes are the main aesthetic here. Not gonna lie, I'm very confused. As of late 2019, Alpha Dream shut their doors after filing for bankruptcy. Now this doesn't mean that the series is done with, need I remind you, Nintendo owns both Mario and Luigi, but it's definitely the end of an era. This is a very fascinating franchise that I feel doesn't really get talked about all that much. They just happen to be the Mario RPGs that you find on portable consoles, and that's it. 5 games and 2 remakes, that is certainly an impressive lineup, and I figured now is a better time than ever to take a look at what this entire series is all about. Starting off with, of course, Superstar Saga. Does anybody else remember when Nintendo advertised this new sub-series using live-action shots of 2 boys playing around? That was weird, can't say I don't have a few more questions, but hey, I got the game anyway, so clearly they were onto something. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, aka the game where Mario and Luigi dance. Following the trend the original Super Mario RPG started, Superstar Saga tells the story of the Mushroom Kingdom under peril from a brand new threat. That of Cackletta and her assistant, Fawful. After disguising themselves to meet up with Princess Peach, they managed to steal her voice and replace it with bombs. Whoa, that's pretty sick, dude. And this is all to take control of the powerful Bean Star in order to take over the kingdom. So it's time to, of course, bring in the Mario Bros to set things right. I always loved this part here, getting to play as Toad right at the beginning. It is the only time in the game you can do this, but it does a good job letting you know right off the bat that this is going to be a bit of a different journey. I mean, for crying out loud, Toad sees Mario naked. I wouldn't want to wish that upon my worst enemies. During this opening segment, 2 of the series' prominent features start to shine. First off, the humor, primarily from Luigi. Paper Mario was certainly charming and funny as well, but more of that stuff is certainly not a bad thing. Luigi didn't even want to be on this adventure, but my boy, he didn't have a choice. And all of the original designs for the characters too, it's so cool. Whether it be these quirky redesigns of series staple characters, or brand new ones that are very much out there. It's just very pleasant and refreshing to look at. And the bosses in particular are really neat. One of them is like a hermit crab with a Christmas tree shell. Finally, my fantasy fulfilled. And we have all of this on top of exploring a brand new land, the Bean Kingdom. I don't know what compelled the developers to make a land based on beans, but hey, it works. As you progress, the story stays pretty straightforward. A couple hours in, you actually get to encounter Cackletta and the Bean Star. Tackling the main antagonist in a battle that isn't the final one is something the series would go on to do quite often, and it's kinda cool to see. But naturally, of course, that's not the end. Just when you think things are all nice and safe, Fawful takes an injured Bowser and implants him with Cackletta's soul, creating the incredibly disturbing looking Bowletta, another trend this series would work with in the future. Oh, and why is Bowser injured, you may be asking? Well, that's because after Bowser was shot out of a cannon and presumably lost his memory, this little guy here, Popple, threw a mask on him, called him Rookie, and recruited him as his partner. And after a battle that led them flying way up into the sky on an enraged Beanstar, and just as Bowser's memory is getting back to him, they all fall off and scatter. Bing bang boom, Bowser looks scary now. It's totally the lack of nose and the addition of breastplates. Cackletta really knew how to assert her dominance. At the core of the experience, yeah, this is a pretty standard, lighthearted RPG. Dare I say, a gateway RPG. A game that follows all the tropes of the genre, but simplifies them to a bare bones level to keep things straightforward and at the forefront, fun. It's a style that the previous Mario RPGs went for, but there was a lot of stuff here that makes it different than those previous attempts. And it all lies within the brothers' actions being at your fingertips at all times. Well, until one of them gets like abducted or something for a while. This game is bonkers. One brother is controlled by A and the other with B. That simple approach keeps this entire quest engaging, from controlling each of their jumps for platforming or timing their dodges when being attacked. And yeah, platforming, there's a ton of it here, and it feels great to do. And throughout the adventure, you also gain a bunch of new abilities that can be used for traversal in the overworld, and new attacks for battles. And speaking of, the battles retain their action command system as well, a must-have for RPGs of the Mario variety. And something pretty cool that I always appreciated, you learn the majority of your new moves from other duos. They really took this whole red and green pair working together thing, and went all out with it. And it immediately gives this series a unique identity. Admittedly though, the fire and lightning moves that you get do seem like a bit of an afterthought. Unlike jumping or using a hammer, there's rarely any benefit of using them in battle, and the overworld puzzles that you do use them in are far from clever, but hey, at least we get to see the brothers getting a massage. That's always nice. And then we have Bean Kingdom itself. I love this place. On paper, a lot of it does seem like your traditional Mario flair, just with beans, but a lot was actually done here to let you know that these aren't the lands that you're familiar with. For one, each section is named after some sort of synonym for laugh. Hoo Hoo Village, Chuckle Huck Woods, Tee Hee Valley. That's really clever, I like it, really adds to the cartoony charm here. And admittedly, since this is on the GBA, I remember thinking to myself for a while that the world felt pretty small. But an hour or so into the game, at the top of Hoo Hoo Mountain, there's a telescope that you can interact with. Suddenly, whoa, this place is actually huge, and you get to visit every inch of it. It's a good thing you have your trusted passport on you at all times. It may seem pretty minor, but I would argue this goes a long way to world building. There's only so much you can convey on a small screen, so getting to see this huge landscape in the palm of your hands, I love it. And there is such a handful of memorable moments sprinkled throughout the entire landscape. Moving from one area to another via a minecart segment, or riding atop of Luigi transformed into a surfboard. You get to explore a brewery that's creating a ton of the popular drink Chocola Cola before fighting a monster made out of Chocola Cola. After going inside Woo-Hoo University, you are being greeted by the viruses from Dr. Mario. And these spouts of water that you find early on, you can get Mario fat off of them. This game does everything. There's also that part where Luigi dresses up as Princess Peach and, not gonna lie, he nails the look. Oh, and that's right, there's also that part where Gino shows up to explain that one random minigame, and then that would be the last time he ever made an official appearance aside from a costume in Smash Brothers. I'll never forget. Playing this game is a ton of fun, but as time goes on, signs of first game in the series-itis do start to show. Things that later games would do better that end up showing some slight faults with this first attempt. Unlike the rest of the series, there are no gimmicks tying anything together. It is pure Mario and Luigi gameplay, which is fine, but just know that this is the only game in the series to not have some sort of overlying concept aside from purely going on an adventure. And also, the game is pretty short, clocking in at about 10 plus hours. Which again, totally fine, but it is also super easy. Whenever you level up, you have a choice as to where some skill points will go. Just keep adding points to attack and this game is a total cakewalk, nobody stands a chance. It's not bad since it's all still a matter of mastering the timing based moves you have access to, but it's certainly odd to have really no incentive to grow the other stats, unless you wanna just make the game harder for yourself. The stash stat is pretty neat though, raising this grows your chances of critical hits and lowers item prices. Cool. I just don't see any reason to put any extra points into it. Granted, I guess it's not too different than playing Paper Mario and strictly upgrading flower points, but I still feel like you have to strategize around your decision there. Here, whether or not you main the attack stat really just makes the game easier or harder for yourself. That's it. The simplest bosses that took a few tries for me when I was younger don't stand a chance anymore. They go down in like a minute. Honestly, I know these were small complaints, but they're the only ones I have. I love this game to death. I just don't want to come off as biased, okay? Okay, thank you. Regardless of how you lay out your stat points, the end of the adventure is still pretty cool. After all the trials and tribulations you face along your journey, you eventually travel to Bowser's floating castle, rocking that same brick and lava aesthetic that we're all familiar with. And within, you get to fight the returning Koopalings. I always loved this series of fights. While most people remember New Super Mario Bros. Wii as the return of the Koopalings, yeah, this game did it earlier. It's a great use of them too. Each one is presented with a different gimmick rather than being slightly more powerful attack sponges. I am a big fan. The platforming here is really solid too. Bowser's castle in this game is just sweet overall. And then there's the final Cackletta fight. Oh man, the final fight. The initial form is a bit of a pushover if you keep attacking her head on, especially with an all-out attack stat. Holy cow, like 30 seconds is all it took, I swear. But then she inhales you and you get to fight Cackletta's soul. The atmosphere is eerie. The music, heart-pounding. You start with 1 health. Okay, yeah, this is cool and all, but it is also a bit of a problem. While this would definitely set the stage for future epic final fights in the franchise, a common complaint with this game in particular is the difficulty spike with this encounter. And to be honest, it is the reason why I do like to play this game on the self-induced, quote, easy mode. Basically, it's a fight that you can get good at, but the game doesn't properly prepare you for what's in store. Dodging attacks is a lot more difficult, opening up the weak spot takes a decent amount of time, she'll regularly heal herself, and if you screw up and die, you gotta go back and do the fight before it once again. Since I've beaten this game multiple times already, this is a total breeze, but I have heard many stories of people who have played this game for the first time hating this fight, and I can see why. If you are at all familiar with this series, you already know that final battles here are a big deal, and this one, unfortunately, is one of the weaker ones. But hey, with enough perseverance, Cackletta's soul is gone for good. Bowser returns to normal, and before he wakes up, we leave him to fall with the crashing ship. Poor guy didn't know what hit him. With the day saved, the gang ride off into the sunset, wrapping up the first adventure in this new series. At the end of the day, Superstar Saga is a simple, fun, and funny RPG. There's like that one escort mission in the desert that kinda sucks, and there's a fetch quest near the end of the game that does feel like a bit of padding, but they're all relatively minor blemishes, honestly. If anything, that final fetch quest is the only time in the game you're encouraged to explore the entirety of Bean Bean Kingdom, so you can get to the paths that you pass over by going through the main adventure. It is definitely padding, that's just what it is, but I always enjoyed running around to gather fruit, to feed the different colored Yoshis, to spice up their special movie theater. That's just cool. Any place showing a Kirby and Starfy movie has my support 100%. There's a few side quests that you can tackle too, like making a bunch of shirt patterns. Minigames that are mandatory during the adventure have some high score challenges when you return to them, and probably the most famous of all, beans. Back in the Star Beans Cafe, you can take a ton of different beans that you've collected along the journey and assist Professor E. Gadd with making a bunch of different blends to gain some stat points and also obtain some extra prizes. But what's known about this quest isn't what's here, it's what isn't here. Taking a look at the cut content from the game shows that not only were you originally making these blends for E. Gadd, but also for other Nintendo characters. Captain Olimar, Samus, Link, Fox McCloud, the Excitebike Racer. This would have been so cool in the final product. You already get items based on these characters too. It makes their removal seem all the weirder. Sadly, it would be a few more years before we get to see Wario letting his gas loose onto the world. But after all this time, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga remains one of the most memorable Mario adventures. It is part of the 1-2 punch that made Luigi a character worth caring about, and it is easily one of the finest games the GBA has to offer. Oh yeah, the 3DS version. 14 years later, we were graced with a remake on the much more powerful 3DS, and it's pretty sweet. I wanted to focus on the original release for this video since it holds up so well, but to be honest, this is probably the best way to experience this game nowadays. It looks better, it sounds cleaner, there's a ton of quality of life improvements like full analog control, there's an easier way to swap between all your bros abilities. When you're in battle, the alternate bros moves are now separated from the original ones, which is awesome because now you're not required to remember a few button combos. And you can speed up cutscenes, thank God. There is amiibo support as well, which I mean, it's a thing. We got some neat figures out of it, so that's nice, but the content itself, not too compelling, honestly. The biggest argument against this version is the, quote, lack of charm in the transition to a new console. And trust me, I love me a good pixelated aesthetic as much as the next guy, but damn, this game still looks super good. There are certainly elements that should have been brought over to maintain that original identity, like, why did you change the tree? That was far from the biggest issue about the original game. But when you look at the entire picture, it's really not too much of a downgrade, I feel. And unlike the other 3DS games in this series that opted for 3D worlds, for this remake, it plays on 2D art instead, with much more advanced lighting effects, and it is pure eye candy. This also gives us a smooth 60 FPS too, and man, it is so good to see up close. And even though Cacletta is still relatively tough here, it's like one of the only things in this game that's a 3D model, and that's pretty sick. There's no Geno anymore though, that kinda sucks. And those movie posters that I mentioned earlier got changed to more fitting art for the series, which I guess is understandable. I still want a Starfy movie though. And this game also doesn't support 3D, I know, contain your tears. In general though, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. Just don't play that new Bowser's Minions mode. Wow, it's so bad. It provides more story details to show you what's happening when Mario and Luigi are off somewhere else, and that's kinda neat, but oh man, is this ever the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. It's like the squad building thing of a bunch of the game's enemies, and as a commander, you issue orders to your group, and on paper, sounds pretty cool, kinda sounds like Pikmin, but in practice, oh man, there is so much time that goes by with you barely doing anything. I can't imagine a single instance where this isn't the worst thing ever. This Beans War. I genuinely appreciate the effort to add something new here, I do, but I would argue the core game is so strong, this shoehorned side mode simply wasn't necessary. At the end of the day, it is nice having all of these games in this series now playable on 3DS. I love that Game Boy Advance version, I have so much nostalgia for it, but it's really cool being able to now have everything under one roof. That makes this remake worth it for that alone. If you enjoy Mario RPGs, you already know that Superstar Saga is one of the finest. It does sort of fumble at the very end, and that entire side mode in the 3DS version is hot garbage, but on the whole, fantastic game, and it is the great start to a fantastic series with many highs and many lows. Super Paper Mario is in such an odd place in the overall series. Yes, it is that game that still rings true, poking fun at people complaining about games they've never played on the internet, but it is a whole lot deeper than that, trust me. Almost as if you can easily graph out the rise and fall of a franchise, 64 and Thousand Year Door were incredible, and just when we thought we were getting more of that, Sticker Star and Color Splash played with everybody's emotions, and I don't think OG Paper Mario fans have been the same ever since. And that's coming from someone who did enjoy Color Splash. Super released at this very weird time, this sort of midway point during a major shift in the series. It's not a forgotten game by any means, but depending on who you talk to, whether or not this is one of the good ones is kinda hard to come to a conclusion to. But now, I think it's my turn to throw my hat into the ring. I've been a fan of this series ever since it first debuted, I've owned this game since 2007, and on the cusp of another Paper Mario game that is sure to cause even more rifts in the community. I'm excited about that one. I think it's as good a time as any to check this game out and see how it holds up. You remember those cute little Bowser side-scrolling levels from TTYD, right? What if that was a full game? Bam, Super Paper Mario. Coming off of the success of that absolute classic, development quickly began for a sequel. On the GameCube, this answers one of the biggest questions about the game right off the bat. Why isn't Super more of a traditional RPG? Well, it was originally going to be on the same console as an already existing one, so I can totally see why Nintendo wanted to put out something different. But I'm assuming the combination of development leaking too far into 2006 and coming up with ideas to use the brand new Wii controller, the game was eventually moved over to that new console instead. Twilight Princess, famously released on both, and Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, a racing game meant to use the bongo controller on the GameCube, also made the jump, with a much less good control scheme, let's just say. I loved this game when it was new, and in 2007, I feel like the reception was a lot more generally positive, but as time has gone on, and the wounds of a Paper Mario fan have grown a lot more devastating, I think people are now a lot more split on this one. It does some of the things that made the original game special, but the gameplay was totally changed to be more experimental. Let's take a brand new core concept and just keep messing with it as the game goes on. No matter how outlandish the idea may be, we can figure out how to make it work. There's a dating sim in this one, for crying out loud. And this idea of experimentation within the Paper Mario franchise still carries through to this day, despite the fact that nobody asked for it. When looking at Super specifically, the aspect that easily gets the most praise is the story. And yeah, you know what? It is pretty fantastic, but in a way that is not so cut and dry. The game starts off with Peach getting kidnapped, and then you gotta go to the 8 worlds and defeat the bad guys to get the shiny things. That is so super basic and to the point, and for a while, it doesn't really get all that much deeper than that. Count Bleck makes for a pretty interesting antagonist, and his crew does have some bright moments, sporadic as they may be, especially when Mimi transforms into this terrifying spider thing. 10 plus years later? Yeah, bro, that's just creepy. Oh, and Dementio. Man. By the end of the adventure, this dude makes one hell of a bad guy. Easily one of the most intimidating in the entire franchise. But for the first half of the game or so, things remain relatively bright and bubbly. A jolly romp through colorful worlds and wacky bad guys with a pretty great soundtrack in tow. Francis is still just as bizarre as always. Super weird otaku fills his mansion with cat-made robots and other Paper Mario references, and then there's that dating sim segment right before the actual boss fight, which is still hilarious. One of the conversation choices for Peach is asking a giant lizard how much he makes. That's genuinely amazing. This masked being, Mr. L, is pretty great as well. He looks so familiar too. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's just something about his appearance that reminds me of somebody else. Soon after meeting him, you fight a giant robot head in space, so I can't really be bothered trying to remember what I don't remember. This is just really cool. However, after that, things take a turn for the dire, I guess is a way to put it. In between each chapter, short text blurbs pop up telling the story of a pair of loved ones not able to live the lives they desire. And for the longest time, there's no context given to it, it's just up to you to figure out what's going on. We also get to see the inside of these meetings in Count Bleck's lair, and slowly get to see what his true motives have been this entire time. Before the game even begins, he forces a fake wedding between Peach and Bowser to call upon the Chaos Heart, and unleash its power to destroy the world. And during your adventure, you will see a black hole in the sky continue to grow in size. Now, in a typical game of this style, you think you'd be fixing things before the black hole reaches max capacity, but in all actuality, by the time you reach chapter 6 and you're in the middle of this tournament, you're actually too late, and the end of the world is about to occur. Once that news breaks, all of the participants in the tournament are terrified, and rightfully so. You watch their world get totally eaten up by a black hole. Oh man, it even killed my controller batteries. This got way too real too fast, hold on. All that remains is a lifeless white void, and just when you think you've made some real good progress, taking down Mr. L once again, he actually more or less gets totally killed, and then everybody else gets killed too, and now your main objective is to fight your way out of literal hell. I don't think anybody played Thousand Year Door and said, needs more hell. It's kind of cute. I mean, all of the spirit characters refer to this land as the Minus World, a clever little reference to the original Super Mario Bros. But when you look past that, these dudes are dead. And from there, the stakes keep growing to an incredible degree. And honestly, it can get kinda depressing too. Count Bleck's backstory and how he ties together with your primary partner, Tippy, is actually really well written. And it's cool how we have this bad guy wants to end the world plotline with so much depth that's told to you as a reward for making your way through the adventure. This part here is pretty notable. You must prevail. Let no one else in the universe feel this sadness. And then Luigi hits him with the okie dokie. God, Luigi, show some emotion, you're heartless. You can definitely make the argument that the story only gets good about 2/3 of the way through, but the end contrasts the cheerful beginning so much, it makes the holy cow, they got away with rated E for this moments have a much stronger impact. That being said, the bulk of the original characters do leave a lot to be desired. I always thought they were pretty uninteresting, and I was never really a fan of their blocky designs, but at least the locations are somewhat populated, so that's nice, and they don't really overstay their welcome, so it's not that big of a deal. They just don't compare at all to the townspeople of the previous games. We still get plenty of that good old Paper Mario wacky, goofy goodness, and plenty of emotional moments as well. It is a very fulfilling plot all the way through. There's this one part where Mario silently hesitates, leaving Luigi alone to fight for himself. This is more character development for Mario than you can find in any other Mario game in the entire franchise. After you beat the story, you're able to re-enter that previously destroyed tournament as a post-game extra, and since that is a result of you saving the world, it is a whole lot more satisfying than it would be otherwise. It's still incredibly repetitive, but hey, it's kinda cool. So yes, the story is just as awesome as everyone says it is. As for the gameplay, yeah, it's alright, I guess. I understand what they were going for here. You take the RPG elements of series past and tie it into the more traditional side-scrolling Mario gameplay. For the most part, it's fine, but there are so many things that were attempted here that, in my opinion, really don't land. Don't get me wrong, there is definite fun to be had here, but it often feels like they just couldn't settle on how much of an RPG they wanted this game to be. Your final party consists of Mario, Peach, Bowser, and Luigi, who surprisingly looks like Mr. L for some reason. I don't know, I don't understand that one. They each have their own abilities, but Mario is the only one able to perform the game's main gimmick, swapping the perspective from 2D to 3D. Since many of the game's puzzles and paths to progression lie within the 3D space, there's not much reason to play as anyone else. You change to Peach to cross over that long gap, and then immediately change back to Mario. The same goes for Luigi with higher platforms because he can jump higher. At least Bowser's a tank, able to deal extra damage to make bosses a breeze, but still, there's no reason to play as him otherwise. This also kinda nullifies a lot of the items too. There are plenty of options that you can find and purchase that give you RPG-like extra attacks. Utilizing them to deal the most damage usually takes far too long, and it's far too gimmicky to get right when you can just nail a few hits on the head instead in just as much time. And your partners this time around, the pixels, aren't all that useful either. Once you get carry, you're gonna stick to that one. It makes you faster and makes your hitbox for landing on enemies a little bit bigger. Cool. The others are just there to solve contextual puzzles. There are so many tools at your disposal in a game that doesn't really need them. And since all you need for battles is Bowser, carry, and maybe some healing items for if you take too much damage, the game is subsequently also very easy. The stage themes can be very interesting, but the things that you do in them rarely are. One stage in Chapter 2 tells you to grind out money to pay for a broken vase, a segment that is only saved because you can find the password to a ton of rubies online, rather than wasting your time getting some money and purchasing the password in-game. You explore space in Chapter 4, that's kinda neat, but it's also pretty easy to get lost because there aren't that many set pieces to keep track of. Multiple chapters also feature fetch quests. Just run around the area to find a couple of things and then go back to the origin point to unlock progression. Sometimes things are just hidden in plain sight, so you gotta point the Wii Remote at the screen because your partner Tippy has the ability to see things that are invisible. Cute idea in 2007, not so much anymore. Ha, do you get this one? It's pretty funny. You see, you make it to this block puzzle with no idea what to do, so you have to travel all the way back to this guy and literally write out the word please 5 times, so he gives you a combination that is so long it is impossible to memorize, so you gotta write it down instead and then utilize it when you get back. That's funny. To move forward in this level, you gotta stand on the pillar and then press minus and 1 at the same time. What? It kind of feels like the game just really hopes you enjoy the novelty of the 2D to 3D mechanic because, aside from that, things can often feel boring and monotonous. Once again, it's not that there aren't moments of fun throughout the adventure, but in the grand scheme of things, those segments are relatively bare bones. Arguably, Super's high moments are a lot higher than Thousand Year Doors, but the low moments are also a lot lower. And that, in my opinion, is the crux of the argument here. The story in Super Paper Mario is fantastic. It's really, really good. And since it just keeps ramping up all the way until the end credits, it makes you feel really good when you finish the game up. Almost so that it kind of makes you forget all the mediocrity you had to go through to get there. When you simply take the game for what it is and not really think about some of the poor design choices, it is worth noting that the game is still pretty fun to control. The combat can be a bit iffy from time to time, but moving forward and seeing what the next level is going to throw your way is still enjoyable. There's 2 different pits of 100 trials, and also the aforementioned Samur Kingdom tournament, providing challenges pitting you against 100 rooms of enemies. The rewards for doing so aren't all that great, mostly just cards with current and previous Paper Mario partners on them, but it's at least something to do, and they are easily the most difficult challenges in the game. There's also this pretty nifty arcade with 4 minigames that all use the Wii Remote. Always been a fan of stuff like this. You got a bunch of recipes that you can cook up, there are maps leading you to hidden items. None of this side content gives you anything really worthwhile, but if you like this game, there is side content aplenty to dive into. Is Super Paper Mario good? Yes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I would say yes. Almost in the same way I think Color Splash is good. Let me finish. I believe that both of these games are far more similar than people are willing to admit. They both feature plenty of elements that made those original 2 Paper Mario games so special, but they're implemented around a bunch of other mechanics and design choices that seem experimental just for the sake of experimenting. As a result, unlike the universal praise those original games get, these 2 are incredibly divisive, and in my opinion, if a game from a popular series is considered divisive, then yeah, if you haven't yet, you should totally check the game out. Everybody's opinion is different here. You may come out with this with a brand new favorite, or you may hate it. You'll never know unless you try. And remember, you don't want to be that guy that goes online to complain about games that you've never played. But yeah, Sticker Star is still bad. No video on Paper Mario is truly complete without knocking this game at least once. Super Paper Mario is a good game, but because it's not universally praised like the first 2 games, it ends up being more of a conversation piece than anything else. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga was such a damn good game. We already had a couple of RPGs in the Mario universe at the time, but hey, you make a new land to explore, you give Luigi a spotlight tied with a unique control scheme, and essentially make it the portable equivalent to the console Paper Marios, and we got something really special. I still love this game, and it holds up incredibly well, and looking back, you know, we got a successful Mario game. Where are the sequels? That's obviously gonna happen. That's obviously gonna happen. E3 2005. This is actually the first time I ever knew there was an annual event where a ton of new games were getting revealed. At the time, I kinda thought that they just happened. This was the year Nintendo unveiled the Revolution. That was enough clickbait to get me interested at the time. And it turns out, yeah, they announced a bunch of stuff that year. And what's that? A new Mario and Luigi game on the DS? This was an entirely new concept for me back then. Game announcements have excited me to no end ever since. And thusly, the game was mine that upcoming Christmas, alongside Mario Party 7, Mario Tennis Power Tour, and Ed, Edd n Eddy, The Misadventures. I am bringing that game up more than I ever thought I would. Mario and Luigi, Partners in Time, the first foray onto the Nintendo DS, and that one game featuring Lead Speak Hammer Bros for some reason. The Baby Mario Bros are a main selling point here. We got time travel now, that's pretty cool. This is surely something that a commercial featuring guys learning to take care of babies could really help get people excited about what's to come. This one is often considered to be the forgotten game in the series. It didn't get a 3DS remake like games 1 and 3 did. It's just not really that talked about in general. And even when you look at the box art, outside of the original game, outside of Japan, this doesn't do the white background with both Mario and Luigi popping out of the logo. This is just good art, which is fine, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. As a result, I wanted to get to the bottom as to why this is the forgotten game in the series. Some people seem to really love it, some people seem to be indifferent to it. What are my thoughts? It's a Mario and Luigi RPG, alright. Man, this title screen is such a nostalgia trip. 2 screens, man, this is so cool. Showing direct footage doesn't really do it justice. They purposefully spaced out the graphics with the screen gap in mind, so it ends up feeling like one big screen instead of 2 separate ones. Yoshi's Island DS did the same thing. I don't know, man, this is one of the coolest things DS games could do in my opinion. Alright, so once again we're dealing with time travel here. Things can be a little bit fishy, but let's give explaining the story a shot. We start off back in Peach's castle in the past, where baby Bowser is trying to steal baby Peach, and the baby Mario Bros go to stop him. They've really been doing this forever. Before long, the castle gets invaded by an army of alien ships, forcing everybody to flee. Meanwhile, in the modern era, we learn that Professor E. Gadd created a time machine, and Princess Peach, along with a couple of toads, used it to travel back to the past. And would you look at that, it's just about time for the ship to return to the proper time period. Oh, princess, you don't look so good. After dealing with the alien menace, a time portal pops up out of nowhere in the castle's courtyard. The brothers dive on in, purely by choice, bringing them to the past as well, in the middle of another alien invasion. So yeah, the main villains this time are an alien race, the Shroobs. Not as creative as Bean People, I'm gonna be honest, but hey, it gets the job done. Little purple toad-like things, sure, they're more adorable than evil in my opinion. I want to just give them a good old pat on the head, but hey, we can make this work. Before long, since everybody is now in the same time period, both sets of brothers finally get to meet up for the first time and all board the Koopa Cruiser for safety. Barring the time both Marios were playing golf for some reason. We didn't ask questions back then, that just happened. Well, the escape plan fails to no one's surprise. They crash land into Bowser's castle, and from that point on, it's a quest to figure out just what the heck is going on with these new alien creatures. We gotta put back together the Cobalt Star, the power source for the time machine, and of course, save the princess, all the while seeing just the most adorable interactions between brothers and baby brothers I could ever imagine. Oh, and yeah, Stuffwell. We have a new helper character now, and he's a suitcase, which is kind of cute, and he's just there, honestly. Realistically, this could have just been a slideshow of the interactions between the Mario Bros and the baby Mario Bros, and we would have had a 10 out of 10 on our hands. I know time travel logic says you really shouldn't mess with yourself in a different time period, but I don't care, man, this is totally worth it. One of the main claims to fame for Partners in Time that you will hear from many people's opinions is that the plot is a lot darker than you would expect. Like, early on we see a toad strapped to a tree have its life energy sucked out of it and then it turns into an actual mushroom. What have I gotten myself into here? But if I'm totally honest, on the whole, I don't know, man, it's not a bad story, but I definitely wouldn't say it's all that dark. If anything, it's just more moody than ever. The color palette is a lot more toned down, same thing goes for the music. And the whole purpose of the Shroobs is to simply destroy the Mushroom Kingdom. I get it. But that being said, some of the bosses standing in our way are a caterpillar trying to get a drink of juice and a chubby Shroob holding a lollipop. This does not scream dark and foreboding to me. Wacky antics are a major staple of the Mario and Luigi series, and while it may not be as prominent as the last game, there are definitely some moments of kooky goodness to be found here. Look at this. Baby Mario got fat. Overall, the story is still pretty straightforward. However, in this instance, it's almost to this game's detriment. Once you get the ball rolling, not much really happens. That alien threat is constantly looming over your head, and aside from the introduction of their leader, Princess Shroob, the entire point of the adventure is to simply repair the Cobalt Star, whose pieces have been scattered randomly across the land like they're Dragon Balls. Until the near end of the game, that is pretty much the only plot point that is dragging you along. You just kinda deal with some random alien shenanigans along the way. The menace of the Shroobs can be interesting, but the plot itself isn't. The developers definitely seemed more focused on simply wanting you in control of the bros and baby bros rather than tell a compelling story. Whether or not that matters to you is entirely subjective. This is a Mario game after all, you may not care about the story, but I will take anything we could possibly do to prevent baby Peach from crying ever again. It's the worst. On a gameplay front, well, this is certainly a direct sequel to Superstar Saga, alright? You run around, explore, solve some puzzles in the overworld, and you have the tried and true action turn-based combat for the battles. And just based on that alone, the game is still really fun. Alpha Dream figured out a formula that works, and for the most part, the gameplay is still really solid. There are a few big differences though, two of which being pretty small. Ha! Alongside Mario and Green Mario, we have Baby Mario and Baby Green Mario joining the fray, finally putting the spotlight on the young Luigi after Yoshi's Island. You know, at least one person asked for this. And for a bulk of the adventure, you're in control of all four at once. Similar to how the previous game took advantage of the GBA's 2 face buttons, Partners in Time takes advantage of the DS's 4 face buttons. Now, you don't necessarily operate all 4 of them at the same time at all times. Rather, the babies often act as a boost to things that you otherwise couldn't do, accessing areas that are too high to reach normally, combining powers to deal stronger damage, stuff like that. You also now have access to a new slew of Bros items for your special moves, which replaces the typical special move stat that we had in the last game. I appreciate the change, but it actually makes it really easy to cheese the stronger enemies here. All it takes to use these moves endlessly is to just purchase them, and that's not a hard thing to do. You get plenty of cash. Overall, it's a harder game than Superstar Saga, however, the enemies are still pretty easy to take down if you pile on the items. Also, if you're willing to risk early stage carpal tunnel, that is a possibility as well. Splitting up the group is also a major focus of the exploration, where you switch up which pair of brothers you get to play as at the push of a button. It usually just results in needing to hit a switch as the babies so the older brothers can progress. It really doesn't get that much deeper than that, honestly. It also doesn't take long for this to feel like a pretty forced gimmick. Having the babies around is a cool idea, but aside from doing slightly stronger damage, they don't really add that much to the overall experience. Unless you count the multitude of adorable cutscenes, and I wouldn't really blame you if you did. A lot of the puzzles feel arbitrarily lengthened to take advantage of the baby concept. Things like swinging a hammer and the weird water inflation from the last game, those are still here. Those are things that Mario and Luigi were perfectly capable of pulling off back then, but they are now restricted to the baby's control, taking longer to execute actions that were pretty quick to use before. Also, do you remember in Superstar Saga you would often run into red and green characters that helped you along the journey to really bring home the idea of these two brothers working together, because hey, there's a bunch of red and green characters working together. Well, aside from traveling back to Yoshi's Island, one enemy in the late game, and one battle against both forms of Bowser, they're kinda just there for the ride. It's not necessarily a bad mechanic, it just feels like a time-consuming way for Nintendo to remind us that hey, we're finally working with 4 buttons and 2 screens here. Oh yeah, 2 screens. This I remember being pretty neat back when the game first released. When you split up and move apart, the babies often occupy the top screen while the older bros take the bottom. By doing this, it's possible to coordinate both duos to be in different places in order to progress. It's not really that big of a deal, I know, but it's still a cool use of the DS hardware. It's even cooler during the battles because some enemies also take advantage of the extra screen space, and many of the special moves that you can pull off require you pay attention to the top screen to better time your actions when they happen on the bottom. It was 2005, the DS was not that old, of course we were gonna get a bunch of 2 screen stuff shoehorned in by any means necessary, and I do like how it's done here. Oh, and speaking of DS specific features, you do also get to use the touchscreen. Once. Whoa, Nintendo, you gotta slow down. Unfortunately, while the characters are fun to control, exploration really isn't all that compelling either. There's no big hub world to explore this time around that branches off into the different parts of the adventure. You just have Peach's Castle that will keep popping up time portals that lead to new areas. And as far as those areas are concerned, well, they're not bad, but they often feel super linear, and later on, they start to go on for way too long and nothing interesting happens to keep them fresh. There just aren't that many memorable set pieces here. People seem to remember Gritzy Desert because that theme got remixed in Smash Bros, and Yoshi's Island gets remembered because... Ooh, big boy. This section is definitely the best part of the game in my opinion. We're talking about Mario and time travel here. Not including Yoshi's Island would have been criminal. The fact they didn't overload this level with references to that game is honestly pretty upsetting. At least Paper Mario did it right with a pseudo-return boss fight. Also, you get to explore the insides of a giant Yoshi, and that's just kinda cool. Clearly, Alpha Dream had a really big interest in this. The rest of the areas here are simply a means to an end. They get the job done, but they're overall pretty forgettable. If I bring up the Vin Factory, you may have a blurry image pop up in your head. You might remember what I'm talking about. And if I bring up the Lead Speed Camera Bros from the Vin Factory, then yeah, there's no forgetting that. No matter how many times I try to forget, these two just won't go away. And on top of everything else, there isn't much side content to go for either. There are once again beans to collect and you can exchange them for items. Yeah, that's it. The Fawful cameo is pretty neat and all, you know, I'm glad he didn't die after we blew him up, but this is the only option for something to do when you're not focusing on the story, and you can beat the game just fine without ever messing with it. There are a couple of minigames along the adventure that you have the option to replay, but let's be honest, that doesn't amount to a whole lot. Alright, so I know I got a lot of complaining out of the way, but the reality of the situation is even though the Mario and Luigi format is inherently fun, and the baby gimmick is really interesting, it seems like we got a lot of creative ideas implemented in not so creative ways. But for what it's worth, as you approach the end of the game, things do get a bit more interesting. After a very long trek through Star Hill and the Star Shrine, we make our way to the Shroob Castle, the result of the aliens successfully corrupting Peach's castle in the past. Now this is pretty cool. We've been exploring Peach's castle the entire adventure, so for the final dungeon to share the same layout just filled with aliens and darkness, this is the most threatening the Shroobs have felt the entire game. We even get this 4-person minigame to take out some UFOs, and it's not great, I'm not gonna lie. It takes some time to really nail your shots, but it's over before long. Once you're at the top though, it is time for the final confrontation against Princess Shroob. Now the end of this game is ridiculous. First we get a pretty lengthy fight against the princess, which is one of the more difficult ones in the game, and not for the wrong reasons like with Cacletta, which then leads to the formation of the Cobalt Star, which in reality, while we were trying to fix it, Princess Peach has actually been trying to keep it apart, because inside resides her older, stronger, and way more wiggly sister, Elder Princess Shroob. And then, when that's done, she powers up into a second phase, where she is wiggly once again. And this is probably one of the more emotional moments from the game. The music is darker and more depressing than anything in series history, and the fight ultimately becomes a battle between two entire races. You can destroy her for sure, but this will result in you essentially condemning an entire alien race to extinction. And all the Elder knows now is revenge. She is a mindless fighting machine. With so much weighing on your shoulders here, can you, in good faith, destroy an entire race at the push of a button? Yeah, of course I can. A bunch of water is sent back through time in an effort to revitalize the ravaged past, the time machine is repaired, and all is well. Until a fallen Bowser gets corrupted by the Elder Soul, resulting in one more fight where you can't even attack, you just reflect a bunch of attacks coming at you for a few minutes. Holy cow, they really wanted to pad this game out. We get one final adorable interaction between brothers and babies, they all go back to their respective time period, and that concludes Partners in Time. A good game, for sure, but one that certainly feels undercooked with how the plot and the baby gimmick was woven into the gameplay. Mario is definitely used to putting up with characters from different universes. He's played basketball with a party from Final Fantasy, played intense games of Fortune Street with the cast of Dragon Quest, and partook in a ridiculous number of Olympic events with Sonic and crew. Why not give the Rabbids a shot now? They're no strangers to going on adventures that didn't consist of a ton of minigames. Anybody out there play Rabbids Go Home on the Wii? Game is pretty damn good. And seriously, when else am I gonna talk about it? The Raving Rabbids have invaded the Mushroom Kingdom. Most of them are bad, a couple of them are good. Go and stop the bad ones. This is all happening because a Rabbid with a special mask, called the Super Merge, is able to combine other Rabbids with different items. That mask is actually the creation of a massive Mario fan revealed in an opening cutscene. It's pretty neat, actually. Meanwhile, a vortex appears above Peach's castle, scattering our heroes across the lands. And thus, the adventure begins, with Mario, Rabbid Luigi, Rabbid Peach, and your helper robot, Beepo, to rid the land of the Rabbid infestation, get your hands on the Rabbid that started this mess, and save the day. And also, Rabbid Peach is pretty great. The characters are all really charming, actually. The Rabbids, I guess you would call trademark yelling, is toned down in favor of actual endearing moments, and it's really nice. Especially Rabbid Yoshi, just look at this guy. Oh, he's so good. Now the game is cut up into two distinct parts, exploration and tactical grid-based combat. Initially, I figured the exploration part would be nothing more than a means to get from one battle to another, but to my surprise, running around the different worlds was actually really enjoyable. There are tons of coins to collect, secrets to find, and Rabbids doing absolutely ridiculous and weird things to themselves to witness. And the secrets you find can either be extra weapons to purchase for your characters, or a bunch of goodies for the main Hub World's museum. There's a couple of bonus rooms to tackle, and even an entire chapter filled with more battles hidden in each world. The soundtrack is fantastic too. Grant Kirkhope, I love you. Mwah. All that being said though, the main goal is still to get yourself into some battles and destroy those rabid pests for good. When it's your turn in battle, you have 3 different options that you can do. You can move to a different spot on the map, attack with either your primary gun or a secondary weapon, or activate some passive abilities. And each of the characters specialize in different aspects, such as the range of their weapons and abilities that either favor offensively or defensively. And all of this stuff can be upgraded via a weapon shop and a skill tree. And oh man, I do love me a good skill tree. And despite only having 3 options, there are some pretty cool things that you can do during your turn. Like you can dash into enemies for some extra damage before you attack properly, and then do a team jump to end your move farther away than you would normally be able to walk to. And if you're, say, Mario, you can jump off of one of your teammates and then jump on top of an enemy for massive damage, and then land right next to that same enemy, you whack them with your hammer, and boom! Yoshi has an area of effect ground pound, Rabid Mario has a dash with an explosion effect, Peach can heal teammates that she lands right next to. There's quite a bit of diversity there. And as for abilities, oh, the Hero Sight one, oh, that's really good. It allows you to attack anybody that moves. So, for example, you can attack an enemy that charges for you after being attacked, and then immediately attack them again. And you activate that move with both Mario and Luigi, and it's so cool seeing the brothers just take those rabbits out. Unless the goal of the chapter is to get yourself or Toad to a specific part of the map. It's better off to play a little bit more defensively then. But ultimately, it simply feels pretty good to go and use everything in your arsenal during battles, and it is satisfying coming up with a team that works for you. Unfortunately, you don't have much choice in terms of your team. Mario is required to be there at all times, as well as at least one of the Rabbids. I'm really not sure why this restriction exists, but thankfully Mario is fairly overpowered with his stomping move. And then I always had Rabbid Peach on deck due to her awesome sentry weapon and her ability to heal, because if you couldn't tell, I can be a little reckless. Any third-party member that I had was really just a sweet bonus. But once again, I really liked Rabbid Yoshi. Just look at him, oh my god, he's adorable! And what's also pretty cool is that you can replay any chapter afterwards to go for a better ranking. And I'm actually compelled to go and do that, especially when you can take your overpowered characters back to chapter 1. Oh, it feels so gratifying. And don't get me wrong here, the game is by no means easy. It's not like, say, a Fire Emblem level of difficulty where one wrong move could mean certain irreversible death, but you definitely can't just rampage through every single enemy without much thought. The strategy mainly boils down to location rather than forming out your attacks, since the risks really just boil down to percentage chances of attacking, which are either 0, 50, or 100, with the chance of a critical that not only does more damage, but also dishes out a status effect. Though I will say the game does start to feel pretty repetitive near the end of the adventure. The game took me a little over 20 hours to complete, and it did spice things up whenever a new character showed up, and the boss fights are all unique, requiring new strategies. But once you learn of all of the different enemy types, you just start to deal with ones with higher attack and health numbers as you progress. Luckily, at the very least, the map diversity kept things pretty interesting. And once again, man, I just love a good skill tree. Being able to upgrade my moves and then using them in battle with noticeable differences, oh, it feels so satisfying. And man, even when you wrap up the main adventure, Beepo gets a few new abilities that you can use to find new items in previous areas, and on top of the secret chapter, each world also has 10 additional challenges of varying difficulties that you can tackle. There is just quite a good chunk of content to be found here. 2 months into the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, something nobody had ever thought about ever before quickly becomes a reality. A brand new game gets leaked onto the internet, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. And I think saying the world was stunned is a bit of an understatement. What the hell do you mean this crossover is happening? It seemed like absolutely nothing about this was gonna work and Ubisoft was gonna ruin Mario the same way they ruined Rayman, but quite frankly, leave it to the main director of the project, Davide Soliani, crying about his game's reveal at E3 2017 as the thing that made people take this game seriously. And all it took was attaching them to the biggest character in all of gaming. God, why didn't I think of that sooner? Rayman may be back to being dead once again, but at least this is kinda cool. Many years later, with the wow factor completely gone, I don't care, man. Kingdom Battle is still a great game. The personality just oozes from this world. The cutscenes are so beautifully animated. The Grant Kirkhope composed soundtrack is fantastic. Some of the enemy designs, like the rabbidifying Mario characters, that's genius. The general gameplay loop is really satisfying, and even the Mario forms of Rabbid characters in your party are really endearing. Rabbid Peach being obsessed with selfies should be incredibly cringe, but it ends up being a really charming character trait. Same goes for Rabbid Yoshi being absolutely insane. This is definitely someone who avoids paying their taxes. It's not a perfect game, like the base level themes are pretty generic, Mario can never leave your 3-character party, and most of the difficulty is saved for the endgame and postgame content, but even still, I was saying this for years after it initially launched and it still holds true today. Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is one of the best surprises during the entire Switch's life. Now, Rabbid Peach dancing to Naughty Girl by Beyonce and shaking her hips to the word sexy? That's one of the worst surprises of my entire life. So when we got a full-blown sequel in 2022 with Sparks of Hope, I was so pumped. The wow factor may be completely non-existent for this one, but now we can get a much more polished RPG adventure, and sure enough, that's what we got. Much grander environments with more varied and original themes. A complete shift of a battle system that forgoes grid-based to distance-based, which is a lot of fun. More customization options with your party, as well as the brand new equipable Spark system, which are these little like Lumas with rabbit faces, which are, you know, some of the most cursed things I've ever seen, but you know, even though that unease doesn't go away for the entire game, it's still fun. The only true downside is there's more voice acting, which should be a positive, but only the helper Beepo has full voice acting, while everyone else just gets the occasional spoken lines. And as weird, we should have just had no voice acting at all at that point. Oh, and also, Rabbid Yoshi is no more. They got him. Shame. He was a nice guy too. But yeah, once again, great game. I think at the end of the day, I prefer the simplicity of Kingdom Battle to Sparks of Hope, and would have preferred a sequel to dive more into Mario references with the Rabbid twists like the first game got, but as it stands, this Mario plus Rabbids combo pack goes down as some of my favorite games during this entire console cycle. They also represent a very small sampling of downloadable content done right, which, from Ubisoft, that's insane. Both adventures have no shortage of content right out of the box, but Kingdom Battle gave us more difficult missions, plus an entire mini-campaign based on Donkey Kong, complete with Rabbid Cranky Kong, a completely unique land to explore, with brand new mechanics to play around with, and even some references to Donkey Kong 64? Unheard of. And then Sparks of Hope DLC brought us more missions with the Tower of Doom, a new story chapter with the last Spark Hunter, and even Rayman returning in the Phantom Show. It's so cool. Kinda like the base game though, there is a lack of references that would have made things more enjoyable, like there's not really much here that actually screams Rayman, but still, fun time, and I'm happy he's back. For now. He's probably gonna die after this anyway, but I'm gonna enjoy it while I can. It also felt like Ubisoft genuinely wanted to celebrate these games existing. Alongside each title's releases, they created a handful of Rabbids figurines that, you know, for an amiibo collector like me, they fit the collection just fine, even if this is totally just plastic with no actual functionality, but still, it's pretty cool. You can even get a big one if you want. Now that we are 2 games into this series, it is safe to say that Nintendo has something really special on their hands. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga set an awesome precedent for a memorable Mario RPG that you can take on the go. And while Partners in Time often gets saddled with a meh status nowadays, it was still a really solid follow-up and a novel use of the DS's 2 screens. Not the touchscreen though. That part sucked. That one went for a darker tone, which was admirable, but I just don't think they went far enough with it. Oh, and also, totally forgot about this. It uses the DS's Rumble Pack. Raise your hand if you forgot the DS had an official Rumble Pack. Yeah, Yeah, I think everybody just did. So then, after 2 successes, what's next? There's really nothing all that interesting about the pre-release hype for this 3rd game in the series. Well, outside of Japan at least. Dude, look at that title! 3 exclamation points? Truly exciting times. Things definitely did feel a bit different this time around. The previous titles were fun little adventures that ticked most of, if not all of the boxes required to make an enjoyable portable RPG. But for the 3rd entry in this series, it seemed like it was going to be a whole lot more ambitious. You're not just playing as Mario and Luigi, but Bowser too! Finally, after so many years and only a couple of small instances, the big bad spiky turtle finally has some time to shine as a playable character. And as for those famous brothers that the name of the series is based off of, well, they adventure inside of that big bad spiky turtle. Bro, what? On the surface, this is already one of the most interesting concepts in the entire Mario series, and I know that opinion is shared by many people. While Partners in Time is now considered to be one of the weaker games in the series, Bowser's Inside Story is considered one of, if not the best, and you can tell its quality because 1 generation later, we would get a full-on remaster, and boy, we'll get to that. Nintendo! These openings always fill me with joy. Man, I've always loved this title screen jingle too. Same thing, man, it is just so joy-filled. The music is really catchy, you can mess with the water on the touchscreen, it is awesome stuff. Remember that I said this. The plot this time around is pretty strong. Probably the most notable thing about it is that we actually get a lot of spoken dialogue from both Mario and Luigi. And it is absolutely incredible. But fine, the actual story itself. Uh-oh. Toad got fat, so a mysterious disease, the blorbs, makes any toad it infects super thick. And during a board meeting to discuss how to handle things, Bowser breaks in, fails, of course he does, and Peach can do this apparently. And also introducing your new partner for this adventure, Starlo. You remember Stuffwell from the last game? Yeah, I didn't think so. Basically, Starlo is your new helper now, and she's pretty cool. I mean, hey, Starlo got a spot on the box art. Stuffwell didn't get that, so I think we know which one's better. Naturally, after being jettisoned out of the castle, Bowser is very upset. And in his despair, he stumbles upon a salesman that gives him a special mushroom that gives him the superpower of massive suck.
Really does suck.
Bowser returns to where he initially failed, inhales absolutely everything in the room, and then passes out, beginning one of the weirdest adventures in the entire Mario franchise. So like now Mario and Luigi are inside Bowser for most of this game, and Bowser never knows, he just hears voices coming from inside himself, but he never learned that it was Mario and Luigi, his heated rivals. This story is amazing. Mario and Luigi was already known as a comedy RPG, but nothing gets wackier than this. On your quest to solve the mystery of the blorbs, Bowser is the one who gets to explore the world, while the two brothers, once again, travel inside of Bowser and manipulate all of his insides to make him more powerful, as well as take out any obstacles that I guess realistically could kill him. This bug is just sitting on one of his pipes. I feel like that would be a really bad trip to the hospital. Uh-oh. Now Bowser got fat. Actually, Mario gets fat too, with like a direct airflow into his nose. And Luigi gets fat too with the new special move. I think Alpha Dream had a very common interest with their characters in this game, and I don't really know how to feel about it. One of the best parts about this game is it went all out with the idea of, let's travel inside Bowser and have things that kinda make sense in that context. Like inside Bowser, we get to fight Goombas that are based on cells, while outside, Bowser gets to deal with Goombas that are based on being chubby. We also get this pretty good new antagonist with Midbis. He's like this pig equivalent of Bowser. Pretty cool. We get assistance from a block person who needs help finding his block cats, and by doing so you get to take on the help of his block dog. And then there's this really creepy block woman who somehow made it into a rated E game. And you even get to travel to Bowser's... Oh no. The storytelling and the pacing of said story is excellently handled, constantly throwing you into new locations, introducing new interesting characters, and those locations you find yourself in are a lot more unique as well. One of the areas, Plaque Beach, is just a sand paradise made out of teeth, and one of the enemies here are Pokies made out of teeth. This is a very stark contrast to the more low-key and sometimes very messed up nature of Partners in Time before it. and it is very appreciated. We even get introduced to 3 of Bowser's minions with actual names and titles. There's Sergeant Guy, Corporal Paraplunk, and Private Goomp, featuring way more unique characteristics than Paper Mario has been willing to dish out lately. They're not major players in the story by any means, but we now have brand new characters to associate with this specific subseries. I think that's really cool. But easily, the best part of the entire plot is, of course, the return of Fawful as the main antagonist. He was already a fan favorite in Superstar Saga for his mannerisms, and he did have a cameo in Partners in Time, which was pretty cool. But being the main villain now, that just makes perfect sense. But the really shocking thing is having actual continuity in a Mario game. This rarely ever happens. Usually every game in this franchise is a unique tale, for better or for worse. And having a returning character show up for more than simply being fan service is awesome. And his motives are revenge. And thanks to the Toads now being all fattened up and also brainwashing the majority of Bowser's minions, his ultimate goal is to harness the power of the Dark Star and take over the kingdom. He's still inherently a pretty funny character, putting that big dumb grin on everything he now owns, but his more nefarious side also feels really fleshed out here, making for just an overall awesome bad guy. And actually, when looking back at Superstar Saga 3DS's mediocre Bowser's Minions mode, the story within actually introduced new lore that showed that Fawful was planning to betray Cackletta and become the ultimate bad guy all along. Some of those Fawful robots you find at the tail end of Bowser's Inside Story, he already had those in development back in Superstar Saga. It is the only part of that mode that isn't total garbage. And boy, are we ever gonna touch on this topic later. The story evokes that same adventurous vibe that Superstar Saga had. We have new locations, new characters, a compelling villain, plenty of comedic moments. It's all there with the added element of
Bowser really does suck.
God, I really am gonna miss that man. Rather than trying to be an upgrade to the playstyle that the previous 2 games had, Bowser's Inside Story strives to follow the same vibe while also making things feel very different. Like for Mario and Luigi, their segments play out as side-scrollers. That same level of exploration is still there, occasionally throwing in some platforming, as well as running into plenty of battles featuring the same tried-and-true battle system that we're used to. But the main difference is in the perspective, as well as the aesthetics, really making this feel totally unique. There's a bunch of minigames that pop up from time to time as well, as ways to improve Bowser's abilities, and none of them feel forced or out of place. Some of them use the touchscreen, and they are a much better use than the one scenario where you used it in Partners in Time. They are perfectly, for lack of a better word, digestible. And there's also a sweet music track that plays alongside them. I love them so much. It ramps up as you get near the end of the minigame, and it's so good. And not only that, but they're also a great use of the 2-screen setup as well. Actions from the brothers on the bottom screen affect Bowser in the top screen. It is so much more of a natural use of this style than, again, what Partners in Time did. That extra space does come into play with the battles once again, but it is a whole lot less common. And as for the battles themselves, well, there really isn't anything going on here that's different than before. Jumping, swinging your hammer, using special moves, leveling up, and allocating points to specific attributes, it's all here and it's all enjoyable. The special moves are handled differently though, in my opinion, the best way the series has done them yet. Sorta similar to getting them through the story as extensions to your natural abilities, you unlock these moves by finding attack pieces spread throughout the areas that you explore. In essence, it is kinda the same thing, but I do think the method of getting these pieces is a bit weird. Sometimes you get multiple pieces from a single block, sometimes you get all of them in one go, and at that point, I don't know, you may as well just find the move in one box and call it a day. But regardless, they are back to being performed with special points instead of an item inventory like in Partners in Time, so that immediately makes this way better, and you can all rest easy. Any chance of getting early stage carpal tunnel is no longer a concern. Throwing fireballs is nowhere near as painful, and my wrists are very thankful. And need I remind you once more, Luigi gets fat, but then we have the star of the show, Bowser. Now this is where you get to explore all of the nooks and crannies of the Mushroom Kingdom in a totally different way. You can throw heavy punches, breathe fire, roll into a spiky ball of doom and move about your leisure, even climbing walls. It's awesome. It may be slower, but he is a very satisfying character to play as. And it's the same thing for when you're battling as him. These play out basically the same, but there are very different ways to approach attacking and defending. Those punches you can pull off, oh, they feel so damn powerful, dude. It's awesome. This battle system is great. You even have the option to inhale your enemies during these. Sometimes it simply affects the tide of battle, but sometimes you bring an enemy inside of Bowser for the bros to take down, which is such a smart use of an absolutely insane idea. And as for the special moves for Bowser, these utilize groups of minions that you free from their cages throughout the adventure. I'm not really sure why you get a special move from only hitting one of these boxes here and multiple inside of Bowser, but here we are. And all of these moves actually use the touchscreen, and I don't know about you, but I do love me some sporadic touch controls in my DS games, even if it's an RPG where no one asked for it. These moves are very satisfying to pull off. They deal a lot of damage too, so it's really a win-win all around. Look at this big old clump of Goombas. I don't know, man, I just think that's pretty funny. I want my own clump of Goombas. This combination of the slower, more powerful style of Bowser perfectly contrasts the slightly quicker, more acrobatic style of Mario and Luigi. And near the end of the adventure, you do actually get to explore the Mushroom Kingdom as the bros proper, which lets you get into a bunch of secrets that you've stumbled across along the way that you couldn't access with Bowser. So really, all of the bases are covered here. This would also be the first time in the series we get introduced to a special battle gimmick. A few times throughout the story, Bowser gets really big. Alpha Dream really couldn't handle themselves, and I for one am uncomfortable. You turn your DS sideways, and now we get to take part in a massive gimmick battle. And these are just alright, in my opinion. All of the options you have available to you are so easy to pull off, and none of it really requires any strategy. It's definitely cool visually, and when it comes to having memorable moments, here we are, Bowser's fighting a building, but gameplay-wise, this offers very little substance. This would, however, start a trend of gimmick battles that the following two games would implement as well, so all things considered, on their first attempt here, it's fine. Nothing all that great, but it's fine. But in some really good news, unlike Partners in Time, we have substantial side quests to go for as well. Minigame score challenges, completing puzzles, boss gauntlets that lead to a hidden boss fight, beans. Again, there's even an entirely optional boss fight with some shroobs. It turns out that some of them were actually frozen in Bowser's castle after the events of the last game. Dude, I still can't believe the continuity this game is sticking to. That's so cool. I went and fought them before doing the final boss, so they were a total cakewalk, so that battle didn't really last more than like 20 seconds or so, but still, it's pretty cool. All of these things combined, this is just all awesome. Partners in Time felt like a stripped down adventure with nothing else to really distract yourself with. But Bowser's Inside Story is not only way more fleshed out, but there is a ton of side stuff to do as well. Ultimately, this is why Bowser's Inside Story is so good and Partners in Time kinda falls flat. They both have very interesting concepts, but while Partners in Time never really reaches its full potential, Bowser's Inside Story takes an absolutely ridiculous idea and goes far beyond anything you could possibly anticipate with you going through the insides of Bowser. What are we doing here? I'm sorry, I just can't believe someone at Nintendo was like, we should put Mario and Luigi inside of Bowser, and then it became one of the best RPGs in the franchise. I can't believe that's reality. I gotta give a special mention to the game's overall presentation because man, the art style and the soundtrack are so damn good. This might come off as hyperbole, but in my opinion, this is one of the best looking sprite-based Mario games ever created, and the music is absolutely incredible. Some of Yoko Shimomura's best work by far. And it's not even like the sprite work is simply really good and that's it, but every character in this game is so expressive and full of energy, and the use of the dark outlines makes everything pop out so well, whether you're playing it on a real DS or looking at direct capture footage. It all looks great. This is all I really want when it comes to my Mario RPGs. Personality. Like, easily, this is my favorite interpretation of Bowser ever. I love the more jokey side that we get with games like this and Thousand Year Door, and while sometimes Bowser can be this threatening menace who is Mario's main rival for a reason, sometimes he can also just be a big ol' lovable meatball, and his design here and his mannerisms complement that perfectly. Again, Remember I'm saying these things. And now it's time to approach the final moments of the adventure. On Mario and Luigi's quest to create the miracle cure that solves the Blorb crisis, Fawful and Midbis manage to awaken the Dark Star, infecting Bowser in the process. This was all done so the star can absorb Bowser's DNA and replicate his body. And despite the Mario Bros' best efforts, it succeeds. And to make matters even worse, once Dark Fawful is dealt with, because he turns dark and subsequently kinda scary looking, he turns into... oh god, a weird spider thing. Gross. But with their powers combined, Dark Bowser is complete. It does seem kinda cliche to simply have a darker form of Bowser as the final boss. I mean, hell, we already got this in the previous 2 games, but the build up to it all, witnessing the corruption of Fawful, getting to see how threatening the Dark Star can actually be, it is, in my opinion, the best implementation of this idea yet. It all takes place in a corrupted version of Peach's castle as well. Again, an idea that we just saw in the last game, but I think it is handled way better here. Everything has been Fawfulized. Those smiles are all terrifying. And then, yes, of course, we have the final battle against Dark Bowser. You know, it's only like the most defining moment in the entire franchise. Honestly, it's kind of perfect. The location high up in the castle is great. The music is unnaturally fantastic. Like, holy cow, I did not think a game like this would have music this epic, but here we are. Pitting Bowser essentially against himself makes for a really engaging boss fight, and then by inhaling the Dark Star bug from it, Mario and Luigi get involved as well, doing battle with Fawful once again, in his much more twisted spider state. There is so much going on here that is just so damn good, and unlike the difficulty spike that we have with Cackletta, or with how long it takes to deal with Princess Shroob, this battle with Dark Bowser and Dark Fawful, it's handled perfectly. Once you take out Dark Bowser for good, Fawful has one more trick up his sleeve, blowing himself up from within Bowser to bring everyone out with him. Instead, this just gets everybody finally out of Bowser's body for good, and peace has been restored to the lands. For everybody except Bowser, who finally sees that it was Mario and Luigi within him the entire time. And oh, he's not very happy about it, so now he's gotta do what he's gotta do. Mario, Luigi, and Bowser all do one more battle as the credits begin to roll. And it looks like Bowser lost said battle. All is right with the world. But hey, the princess sends over a cake to make up for that, or something. I don't know, the main hero of the game gets brutalized and then that's the happy ending. What a way to go out. Maybe it sounds like I'm exaggerating here, but this game is as close to a perfect Mario RPG that you could possibly get. Bowser's inside story walks that fine line of cartoony humor and serious overtones so damn well, without either of them ever feeling forced. The art style is fantastic, the music is so good, the combat is super satisfying. Maybe some of the later battles go on for a bit too long, but that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. This is kind of the perfect Mario RPG. I know people tend to give that title to Thousand Year Door, and that's totally fair. Both of these games overwhelmingly succeed in the tone, atmosphere, and all of the mechanics they set out to achieve. They are both, in my opinion, the best that these two series have to offer. With this game, the Mario and Luigi series transcends being that portable equivalent to the console Paper Mario games and becomes a franchise that is worth keeping your eyes on. And then they released a remaster like 10 years later to a resounding... why? Okay, so Superstar Saga getting a 3DS version made total sense in my opinion. People were super nostalgic for it, you couldn't play the game on that console, there were plenty of quality of life changes that needed to be addressed as well, and I mean, yeah, some people aren't all that keen on the art style, but overall, I think it's a great way to experience that game. But you can already play Bowser's Inside Story on a 3DS due to the backwards compatibility. Who was asking for this? I already went over this in the entire video, but that game was already damn near perfect. Partners in Time is the one that needed fixing, but okay, here we are, Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey. Great. You know that bad Bowser's Minions side game from that last remaster? Well, we got a sequel to it here, and it's still not good. So that's something. They do throw in some brand new characters that are exclusive to this story, so that's kinda neat. but it is still so unfun that I doubt anybody will ever get the chance to see them for themselves. But fine, what about the main Bowser's Inside Story portion of this package? Well, essentially, it is the same adventure, but I don't really know how else to describe this. The entire game just feels slower. Going through your options in battle takes a little bit longer, loading times to get into the battles takes a little bit longer, the game runs at half the original frame rate. Individually, these things may not seem like that big of a deal, but man, that time definitely adds up. It all just feels so sluggish by comparison. If you play it on its own, it's probably fine, but I played both of these back to back, and the remake is simply not as fun to control. And I would say the frame rate plays a big part in that. Not only did the original run at 60 FPS, but so did the remake of Superstar Saga. I was fine accepting no 3D in that one for the sake of having a smooth frame rate, but here, we have no 3D plus a worse frame rate. Also, while I did say that I liked how Superstar Saga looked on the 3DS, I actually don't share that opinion with Bowser's Inside Story. That game oozed charm from every orifice imaginable, including Bowser's... oh no. But here, I don't know man, it's something about Bowser's design, it just doesn't click with me. I don't think the comedic moments come off as entertaining as they did before when they were initially delivered by a pixelated meatball. But I get it, it's totally subjective, at least now we get to see Toads being fat in 3D, so hey! Also, there's new title screen music and there's no water to mess around with. There is a large list of minor changes made to this version of the game, and some, like having a map on screen at all times, does make a stronger impact than others, but with how good the original still is, I think you're better off playing that version instead. Also, they censored Luigi's striped socks in the artwork, and I, for one, am completely outraged. Hashtag bring back Luigi's socks. Wait a second. Mario's right foot is also slightly larger in the 3DS art. I know it's not a big deal by any stretch of the imagination, but that makes the change all the more confusing. From what I can gather, people seem to share my opinions here. Bowser's Inside Story for the DS was a massive success, one of, if not the, best-selling RPG in the Mario franchise. Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey for the 3DS is one of the worst-selling games in the entire Mario franchise, right alongside Mario's Tennis on Virtual Boy. My god, that game had Donkey Kong Jr. in it. I don't know how that one didn't sell well. It is crazy to me that essentially the same game breaks two different sales records on completely opposite sides of the spectrum. Regardless of the poor sales, it's not a bad game, but definitely an unnecessary one. It's still good because the original is also still good. Before its release, Alpha Dream stated that they remade Bowser's Inside Story instead of Partners in Time because they wanted to remake the best received title in the series, and they also wanted to further explore the parent-child dynamic of Bowser and Bowser Jr., which we got in Bowser Jr.'s Journey. Boy, would I hate to tell them that is literally one of the plot points of Partners in Time. They also wanted to maintain the dual screen elements of the DS, which is why they opted to make this for the 3DS instead of the Switch. Even though a lot of these things could have probably been implemented down into one screen just fine. Now, I don't know about you, but those reasons, or some could say excuses, seem a bit weird. The sales were bad, the existence of the game simply confused people, the answers the developers gave to the questions just seemed very, very weird. Honestly, that combined with the average reviews that their last original game, Paper Jam, got, which we'll get to in the future, don't worry, it honestly didn't really come as much of a surprise to me that soon after Bowser's Inside Story on 3DS released, Alpha Dream would file for bankruptcy. They made a lot of weird decisions. The original Bowser's Inside Story is still amazing. Let's not end things on a down note here. Play this game. It is incredible, easily my favorite in the series. It may not be as replayable as Superstar Saga since it's longer and there's a lot more stuff going on, but it is definitely a more fulfilling experience. And it makes the idea of getting a sequel on newer hardware sound oh so exciting. To say being a Paper Mario fan has been an absolute roller coaster for years with no end in sight whatsoever would be an understatement. Coming into this video, you already know that the 1,000-year door is going to be part of the conversation somewhere. And yeah, it is hard to talk about anything with this franchise without some group of people yelling those 4 words at you trying to prove a point. Reception to the Origami King upon its reveal was definitely a lot more positive than Color Splashes, but that opinion with TTYD, for many, still stands. Though, to be honest, getting a new Nintendo game announced randomly on Twitter during a time where the world is currently made of bricks, then yeah, you know, that is enough to get anybody super ecstatic. Sticker Star is not good. I'm glad I can finally get that hot take off my chest. The reality is, the Paper Mario franchise has been going in this weird direction for most of its life now. When you consider Super, which is also not a traditional RPG, we have 4 action-adventure games and 2 traditional RPGs. This franchise is not an RPG one anymore. I know that reality may sting, but that's where we are. Now, I really enjoyed Color Splash. I've said this many times in the past, so I'm not coming into this video with an anti-Paper Mario bias. But with the Origami King, enough time has passed that I want to take a look at the game for what it is, rather than what it isn't. It's easy to get caught up in the moment as soon as a game releases and just start hating on it, and we're not going to be doing that today. We will be discussing the infamous interview questions that sparked a lot of that hate, but we'll get to that. Alright, let's see what the Origami King is all about. Already looking at a 10 out of 10. It appears we have a festival gone wrong once again. This time the town is celebrating with origami. But of course, something's not right here. And before long, inside the castle, we see Princess Peach. Looking pretty weird. She's been transformed into origami, and she begins speaking in a very bizarre way. Shouldn't the Mushroom Kingdom unfold? Yeah, no, definitely not. What of those toads? Shouldn't they be silenced for all of eternity? Okay, on that one, yeah, you make a compelling argument. Okay, so on its own, this is actually a pretty interesting premise. We're already acknowledging that the entire world is made of paper, so having the happy world of normal paper being terrorized by folded up ones, that's pretty neat, all things considered. Taking these living characters and folding them up to serve an evil purpose? That's pretty messed up. And if we're gonna forego the idea of brand new species or interesting mix-ups of existing species, then at least having the normal paper be good and the folded paper be bad is something I can totally get behind. And thankfully, on top of that, we finally have someone at the head of all of this evil, King Ollie. The last 2 titles had their fair share of problems, but relying on Bowser as the main bad guy, that's not interesting in the slightest, I'm sorry. It's something that only the original Paper Mario has really been able to handle super well in my opinion. Ever since that original game, however, having a brand new character to work towards taking down alone makes this adventure a whole lot more compelling. King Ollie is pretty solid. He doesn't really show up too often, but boy, whenever he does, he definitely makes an impact. This also means that Bowser is back to being a side character, which in a Paper Mario game, in my opinion, is definitely where he belongs. I want to see a folded up Bowser as a laptop case. Ollie is also the brother of your new helper, Olivia, which throws some emotional stakes into things as well. That's awesome. Once encountering the evil king for the first time, he fully takes over Peach's castle and surrounds it with a bunch of colored streamers. Whoa, dude, this cutscene, it's actually pretty epic, I'm not gonna lie. We are starting off on a really damn good note here. The series has never really been cinematic before, but I'm totally into this. Aw, look at this. Mario is falling from the sky into a grassland. You see, this is a whole lot more classic Paper Mario than we're giving it credit for. So, okay, fine, it starts off really well, and that's all fine and dandy, but let's get to the main topic that I know a lot of you guys are interested in. The battle system. Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, come on now, after years of asking for traditional turn-based battles, they gave us a system that literally requires you to make turns. Be careful what you wish for. Honestly, I am a huge fan of what Origami King provides here. Every encounter plays off like a puzzle. Rather than the strategy being exclusively knowing what moves to perform and when, each turn begins with you simply trying to line up a group of enemies in a specific way to properly utilize your boots or a hammer as your weapon. They start off really straightforward, but later on, they genuinely get really challenging, and I am a big fan of puzzles like this in general, so learning how to successfully move everybody around in one foul swoop, I found this super fun. Learning how to effectively do so rewards you with a power bonus, as well as the opportunity to take everybody out before they even have a chance to attack you. So on top of being fun, I also found them consistently satisfying. There's even this one building back in Toad Town that fully embraces the puzzle side of things with this sort of challenge mode. When you have a battle system that's primarily based on throwing puzzles at you, having stuff like this is perfect. I love this. But if it ever seemed like too much and I wanted to move on, well, there's also the option to spend coins to either add more time to your turn, or you get the crowd of toads to come in and help you out, straight up getting most, if not all of the enemies totally lined up for you. But then this gets into the conversation of if these battles are even worth doing in the first place. All you receive from these battles are coins, and before long, you're overloaded with them, so being able to cheese them with the toads, that option is never out of reach. It's all of the different items that you can purchase, specifically the collectibles, that are super pricey. So at least all of that money is worth something if you're into that stuff. And in regards to leveling up, there may not be experience points, but you do get stronger by finding all of these hearts hidden across the world. Whenever you get one, not only does your max health increase, but after so long, you will gain more powerful as well. I'm actually totally fine with this system because a ton of these hearts are optional. Getting stronger ends up feeling like a reward for all of the exploration that you can do. It's a whole lot better than solely relying on more powerful forms of existing moves. Though that is still here. And considering how often I did tap into that massive amount of money that I earned, I would say this provides a stronger incentive to battle than the few games before it, where they did feel totally pointless. This is easily the best battle system since the Thousand Year Door, at the very least. Also, all of the different battle music throughout the game are absolute jams. It was worth battling just to dance a little bit alone. But for the boss battles, things take a much more different, well, turn. You know, it's comedy. Now, because there's only one enemy to take down, the roles get reversed. We're no longer moving tiles with enemies on them, but specific items and actions that put Mario on a path to perform a move of your choice. It's basically like a glorified version of Choo Choo Rocket, and I am living for this. I was a bit more skeptical going into these battles, especially since the major bosses this time around are just things you can find at your local office supply store for $2, but them, as well as the Velumentals, these big elemental monsters that give you special moves along the way, are able to manipulate the board in unique ways for every single fight, and it's actually really damn clever at times. They require you to go into each and every fight with a different strategy. No one boss feels like another, and that is awesome. This was something those original Paper Marios did well too. While definitely more traditional, each boss in those games had to be tackled in a different way, making those encounters a lot more impactful. And I genuinely feel like the bosses in Origami King are just as good. There's also a story reason as to why office supplies are your main obstacles here, and it's really cool. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's really cool. If you really hate the idea of puzzles being your battle system, then yeah, this entire thing is probably a wash for you. But if you're not against that, then I gotta say, this is great stuff. I love this battle system. And hey, on top of that, for the first time since Super Paper Mario, I guess, some of the bosses are done in real time. It makes for a really refreshing change of pace, and it's also just cool. Wait a second, got one complaint here. Mario's nose is slightly bigger for some reason. Okay, I'm back on the fence with this one. So yeah, I really enjoy the battle system. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but considering we don't have stickers, cards, real-life objects that are required to take down certain bad guys, it is infinitely better than anything we've gotten in the last, 10 years? It's pretty good. The battle system was arguably one of the most controversial parts about this entire game. Outside of that, yeah man, it's pretty fantastic. Okay, first and foremost, yes, you can pet the dog. I figured we should get that out of the way. It's really best to consider these newer Paper Mario games as adventure games rather than pure RPGs. And with that context, oh man, was this game ever a blast. All of the worlds are so varied and brightly colored. The soundtrack is genuinely one of the best Nintendo's produced in years. Dude, the Sniff City theme has been stuck in my head for weeks and it won't go away, and I don't want it to go away because it is so good and catchy. And the most important thing of all, the moment-to-moment gameplay is consistently engaging, with these holes that you can fill with confetti, toads all over the place with funny little quips upon their rescue. And while the game does for the most part put you in that typical linear fashion, pushing you into the obvious direction you need to go to progress, there are also a few proper dungeons that feel almost Zelda-esque with their design, as well as a couple of wide open areas that are all about exploring at your own pace and solving puzzles within, which were easily some of my favorite moments in the entire journey. Yes, the Thousand Year Door is also super memorable, but let's also not pretend like all of the backtracking that you have to do to succeed is highly engaging gameplay. Okay, sure, we may not be dealing with settings as out there as the earlier games in the series, but these are still some of the most personality-filled locations we've seen since Super. And also, partners are back. Kinda. It's interesting. It's like this weird half step towards the thing we've been asking for years, but in practice, it's totally fine. They kind of assist you in battle, but they are mainly there for story purposes, and once they fulfill said purpose, they go away. That feeling of gathering a crew of people from all these locations that you visit and some of them having these really depressing backstories, yeah, that's definitely not there, but simply having somebody with you, even if it just provides more variety in the text that pops up, it goes such a long way. You got Bobby the Bob-omb, who's great and should be protected at all cost. He really should. There's Professor Toad, who's pretty humorous, and he's a big hieroglyphics nerd. And then there's the combo of Kamek and Bowser Jr. Having these staple bad guys on your side, that's pretty great. The thing is though, yeah, those are the only partners in this game. But I'm actually okay with how it was pulled off. Previously, Color Splash really relied on its humor, almost to a fault. While the game was definitely hilarious at times, there was nothing really of substance to sink your teeth into. Here in Origami King, we still have plenty of funny haha moments, but not as often. The plot points feel a lot more grounded now, and it makes for an overall much more well-rounded experience. I guess, if anything though, there is no story reason as to why the battle system is the way it is, unlike before where the main gimmick was also incorporated in said battles, but that's hardly a complaint here. It just would have been nice, I guess, to know why am I dealing with rings here. That I don't understand, but it's fun, so I guess it'll be fine. Point being, Paper Mario The Origami King is fantastic, and if you are not so upset about not getting the 1000-Year Door 2 that you can't possibly look past that, then this game comes highly recommended. 64 and 1000-Year Door are still the best in my opinion, but this is definitely up there. And maybe if Sticker Star and Color Splash never even existed, people probably wouldn't be as upset about all of these changes as they actually are. That perspective really changes things. Sticker Star burned a lot of people. Okay, fine. Let's talk about the interview. Kensuke Tanabe, employee at Nintendo for years and producer of The Origami King. He should probably keep his mouth shut, to be honest. After the game's release, interviews are starting to show up online that gave some insight into the game's development, with such classic lines such as, "It's no longer possible to modify Mario characters or create original characters that touch on the Mario universe." And coming hot off the heels of the Sticker Star interview that indicated that Shigeru Miyamoto wasn't all that interested in having a compelling story, all of this kinda comes off as, despite giving us a really damn good game with the Origami King, they still seem very tone deaf to the things that people actually want to see. They broke a system that didn't need fixing with Sticker Star, and then fixed said broken system in the 2 games that followed after. But considering at this point the Mario and Luigi series is also potentially dead, we have a Mario RPG void that has yet to be filled, and I think that's what hurts the most. Wait a second, is that Peach from Paper Mario 64? It's the same exact sprite. I mean, that's cool and all, a good bit of fan service, but are we pretending as if those original games didn't happen, or not? Clearly, their current way of going about things is working out totally fine for them. The Origami King will go on to be a massive success, but still, it doesn't really resemble what made those original games so fondly remembered. It's simply the best version of the formula that Sticker Star started. And also, the whole lack of original character thing makes absolutely no sense. Some of the first characters you interact with in the Origami King are tree people that sing to you, so they're not even sticking to their own rules. And you know what games are creating original characters on a regular basis? Actual Mario games. Odyssey was all about that. Why not throw those Toast Arena guys into the desert instead of random Shy Guys? Give us a flying segment with Flygons. Oh man, we can't possibly give existing enemies hats anymore. Come on now. I guess on top of that, we'll also ignore how Goom Boss showed up in Super Mario 64 DS as well as Mario Kart DS, but maybe that didn't actually happen. I think I just dreamed it. Honestly, all things considered, the fact that we got the Origami siblings is a miracle. Paper Mario The Origami King is great, but hearing how the game was made just makes me upset. I still highly recommend going on this adventure because it's an awesome time. I just hope the developers finally get around to the whole listening to what the fans want thing. I hear that method also works. I understand and I empathize with the idea that you don't want to buy the game because you don't support the direction the franchise is going. Believe me, I totally get that, but let's be real here. This is Mario. Nintendo's gonna do whatever they want, so you're better off just giving the game a genuine shot and then see how you feel on the other side. Trust me on this. The game is really good. Just don't think about this interview while you're playing the game. because then you'll get really mad. But now I can't help but think about the potential future for this franchise. There aren't that many paper cliches left. We got stickers, we got colors, origami, office supplies. What else can we possibly milk out of paper? Got it. So remember how back in school, back when you were really young, you would wad up pieces of paper and then spit it through a straw? I got it. Paper Mario Spitball Showdown. You heard it here first. Nintendo, I hope you're hiring. And yes, arguably the biggest announcement of all, he was going to be the main attraction of Alpha Dream's next title, Mario & Luigi Dream Team. This is awesome. All the pieces are in place for something really special here. Bowser's Inside Story was a massive success, the best game in the series yet, and at the time, Nintendo was also trying to really redeem themselves after the initial 3DS failings when it first launched. So we get to travel into Luigi's dreams as a follow-up to the previous fantastic adventure, and we get some extra bells and whistles since we're now on newer hardware. Man, I am super excited. The Year of Luigi, that was such a cool thing Nintendo did, man. You remember when Luigi did the Harlem Shake in the Nintendo offices? Do you remember that fresh meme? This is real. This is a real thing that happened. Making the jump to new hardware with an existing franchise is always inherently exciting. Partners in Time may not have been the greatest RPG in the world, but it was still an interesting showcase of the DS's new capabilities. But now on this next console jump, we get to explore Luigi's dreams. It may not be as outlandish as traveling through Bowser's disgusting insides, but I'm still excited all the same. This is a pretty cool title screen. The music is so bright and peppy. We can mess with Luigi on the touchscreen as he makes these little moaning noises. Finally, my dreams come true. We don't get the brothers yelling Nintendo like the previous games, but that's really not that big of a deal, I guess. One thing though, in Europe, the game is called Dream Team Bros, which I always found kinda odd. I'm pretty sure everybody already knew that Mario and Luigi were brothers, right? Oh man, Bowser's Inside Story, such a fantastic game. That Mario and Luigi, man, they make such perfect cousins. That family dynamic, that's family goals right there. I can't wait to play the sequel. They're what? On top of that, they also removed Luigi's snot bubble from the Japanese box art. This one I'm okay with though, because that is gross. First and foremost, we gotta mention the new art style. When we jumped over from the GBA to the DS, things stayed pretty consistent, just more detailed. Here though, on the 3DS, we get a total shift in art style, and I don't know, it's okay, I guess. I raved over the sprite work in the last game. The way the series was handling its colorful landscapes and the solid borders on all the characters was excellent. By comparison, I do think the previous games looked a lot better, and the characters don't feel as expressive this time around. But Dream Team still looks nice, just not as nice, in my eyes. I guess we didn't get the signature outlines to make the characters pop a lot more since, hey, we have 3D now, that actually works. They probably don't even need an outline anymore. It also helps that the worlds themselves are proper 3D as well. If we look at the remakes on 3DS, we get to see the same sprite work that started here, but all the locations were flat images with lighting effects thrown on top of them. Not here though, 3D all the way. Again, it's all subjective here. I do think they all look good. I just think the other games in the series do some things better. The soundtrack is a jam though. Dude, the upgraded audio quality does wonders for the music. Most of my exploring was accompanied by me timing my jumps to the beat of the music like the entire game. The adventure begins with the crew all getting invited to enjoy a peaceful holiday over on Pillow Island, and Luigi almost dies. Happy Year of Luigi, everybody. On their flight, an evil pillow falls onto the blimp and this huge dark figure pops out. Oh no, but it's okay, it's dealt with in like 5 seconds. Huh. Oh, but it's okay. That was all just a dream Luigi was having? What's going on at the start of this game here? I'm so confused. As Mario and Luigi explore Pillow Island, taking part in some of the festivities, they eventually travel to the underground section of Pillow Castle, where they stumble upon a special looking pillow. And not wasting a single second, Luigi does the quick math in his head and decides to take a nap on it. I respect those priorities, but you actually don't know where that pillow's been. By doing so, this somehow summons a crazy looking portal over his head, and this mysterious aura manages to suck in Princess Peach. Okay, naturally Mario jumps in right after her, leading into the mythical Dream World. And while they are unable to save Peach at this time, they do discover a new helper character in the form of the formerly imprisoned Prince of the Pillow People, Dreambert. He's a big old dork. And from there, the adventure to save Peach, rescue the remaining pillow people scattered throughout the lands, and solve the mysteries of that shadow creature as you explore all of Pillow Island, as well as their respective dream worlds, begins. Soon after, we also learn of the Dreamstone and the Darkstone, artifacts made up of people's happy dreams and scary nightmares, respectively, and both have the ability to grant its users wishes. So, there you go. There's the motivation. But yeah, that's basically the entire plot, and honestly, it's a bit underwhelming in my opinion. Bowser eventually shows his face and teams up with that shadow creature, whose name is Antasma, by the way, which is kind of a neat dynamic, I guess, but it's also hard for me to take Bowser as a serious threat in a Mario and Luigi game after seeing him get fat in the last one. It's almost as if, despite bringing back a bunch of characters, it's kinda like the last adventure never happened. A true shame because that last game handled continuity with Fawful so well. Like, Popple is here for some reason. You remember that one mini-boss who was pretty funny in Superstar Saga and then didn't show up in the next 2 games? Well, he's here now, and he has no recollection of the bros, and after a battle with the Wiggler near the end of the game, he just disappears, never to be seen again, and spoilers, he doesn't show up in the sequel. Why was he here? And on top of all of that, regarding Antasma, you may have not known what he was at the start of the game, but you legit take him out within the first 5 minutes of the story. And it's not like when you fought Cackletta halfway through Superstar Saga and then fought a stronger form at the end. He doesn't even become all that much more threatening throughout the adventure, so it's just a bunch of strange choices all around. Also, the way I see it, the entire dream thing is inherently not as interesting as the last game's premise. Granted, it would be very hard to combat traveling through Bowser's... Oh no. But man, if these are truly Luigi's dreams, then he's got nothing interesting going on in that noggin of his. There's a slight message of self-confidence here with Luigi wanting to prove his worth to his much more accomplished brother, which we do only get to see deep within his dreams, and it is a nice touch, but it doesn't really get that much deeper than that. That's the equivalent of like the journal that Luigi keeps hidden in Paper Mario. I don't know, man, if you really wanted to show Luigi's dreams, maybe show his true reactions to constantly being the butt of everyone's jokes. That'd be something. That's a running gag throughout the entire franchise. Near the end of Partners in Time, where this big star gives Mario words of encouragement and praise, he then looks to Luigi and says, good luck out there. He's a savage, dude. At the very least, I would have expected some, like, Luigi's Mansion references or something. You know, I imagine he sees booze in his sleep every night as it is, but nothing here. The dreams just end up becoming watercolor versions of the areas he fell asleep in. Easily, the best thing this gives to the players is the ability to fondle Luigi's face whenever he's sleeping. It is tied to special moves in the game, but you can do it whenever you want. Ultimately though, those are pretty minor issues. The game is still super funny at times, which is what the series does best. Again, nothing really as outlandish as some of the best moments of Bowser's Inside Story, but still good. The real problem though comes in the game's pacing. The main focus of the story gets established relatively early on, not much really happens on the journey towards that destination, and any moments where stuff does happen takes far too long to get to. Dream Team is a long adventure, man. A basic playthrough took me 28 hours, as opposed to Bowser's Inside Story, which took me a mere 17. And in my opinion, the story simply isn't there to pick up the slack. What we have here isn't bad, but it's hard to get even slightly invested in what's going on here. It feels like they wanted to make this sequel longer, just for the sake of it. And that mentality kinda bleeds into the gameplay as well, but nowhere near as severely. We are 4 games into this series at this point. Yeah, the game plays exactly like all the rest. You run around a bunch of different lands as the bros, and each of them get a respective button to call their own for specific actions, like jumping and swinging a hammer. You touch an enemy so you can jump into a battle where that same 2-button approach applies. This is all a tried and true system, and it is still fun here. It controls a lot smoother too, upgrading to the circle pad on the 3DS and having that smooth 360 control, oh, it feels great. And when we return to the dream world, we see the return of side-scrolling, mimicking the style of exploring Bowser's disgusting insides, which is also where fondling Luigi finally has a purpose. Oh, thank God. Throughout the different dream worlds are chances to throw Dreamy Luigi into the background, which allows you to manipulate the environment by just doing the most unspeakable things to a sleeping person while keeping the game rated E. You mess with a few platforms thanks to a sneeze, you fling Mario around with Luigi's elastic mustache, spin a drill around by breaking Luigi's nose. We can also multiply Dreamy Luigi to a ton of copies to move throughout the environments in different ways, just mowing down hordes of enemies that dare stand in your path. It's pretty satisfying. There's no part of the game where these things get remotely challenging, but it's at least a solid use of the touchscreen. Messing around with Luigi's face to benefit yourself, this is clearly the influence for the romancing options in Fire Emblem Fates. And undeniably, the best thing Dream Team brings to the table is the dreamy battle system. Okay, so like I said before, if you played one Mario and Luigi battle, you've essentially played them all. Enemies have specific tells requiring specific inputs for dodging. There are special bros moves that take proper timing to get right. Yeah, it's the same as it's always been. It's fine, it works. There's some motion controls this time around. That's kind of cool, but yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. They did ruin the Fire Flower though. Now you have to wait for the ball to get big and then you just press the button once. It does completely eliminate the potential for carpal tunnel, which is appreciated, but it's not as satisfying to pull off. And only one screw up knocks you out of an entire all-out attack? Yeah, no, this one sucks now. But once we're in the dream world, Dreamy Luigi essentially fills Mario with his essence, allowing him to harness the power of dozens of Luigis for every attack, doing a lot more damage, as well as being able to take down a bunch of enemies all at one time. You only get a single action per turn now as opposed to two, but you always do a lot more damage than before. And the special moves, now called Luiginary attacks, very clever, are so much fun to pull off. If anything, maybe I would say some of these moves go on for far too long, and that time really does add up since it makes sense to use these moves a bunch, but I thought they were fun from start to finish, so that's hardly a complaint. It kinda makes the normal battle system feel so dull by comparison. The badge system that was in Bowser's Inside Story is a whole lot more prominent this time around, but that applies to both battle types, so even then, the standard battles once again feel a bit lacking. It's just not as successful of a dynamic as the Bros and Bowser, but this still totally works. Also, the music for both battle types is fantastic, so that definitely helps. And speaking of piggybacking off of Bowser's Inside Story, giant battles are back as well. If you recall, I said I thought that they were just okay before. Definitely cool thematically, but you had limited options that left a lot to be desired in my opinion. And I am happy to say that it's been totally fixed here. Giant battles in Dream Team play out like proper boss fights, where you have to consistently assess the situation and figure out which move is best at the right time. That's all I wanted. A lot of it is still doing the obvious QuickTime event when the game tells you to, but there was clearly a lot more thought put into them this time around. As blatant as Dream Team is at ripping off Bowser's Inside Story, this I approve of. It's certainly a whole lot better than... oh man, we'll get to it. Also, luckily, once again, there are side quests aplenty to dig into. From a trading sequence in the main city, photos that you find throughout the land that you can then solve yourself, skill challenges for all of the different special moves, a super difficult gold beanie enemy that is really rare to find and gives you a ton of XP if you manage to defeat it, hidden floor beans, again? Okay, listen, I get it. Having hidden items spread throughout the world makes a lot of sense, and at least bean people do show up in this game, but come on now. This over-reliance on beans is getting to be a bit much. It's getting a bit gassy in here, don't you think? There's even, for the first time ever, an unlockable hard mode after beating the game once. That's pretty neat. It doesn't solve any of the pacing issues with the game, so I wasn't really thrilled at the idea of doing a second run immediately after the first one, but hey, still nice. And this is all very cool stuff. Mechanically speaking, Dream Team does a lot of good, but again, the pacing ruins all of the excitement nearly every single time a brand new mechanic shows up. The tutorials, dude, oh my god, the tutorials, Dreambert, would you just shut the hell up? Oh, the game just can't help itself, man. Rather than giving you the chance to, I don't know, figure something out for yourself, you always get stopped in your tracks to be told how to do literally everything in the game. It's crazy. Dream Team has become sort of infamous for the amount of tutorials found within. And man, on this playthrough, I can confirm wholeheartedly that what you've heard is true. I was in the final dungeon of the game roughly 25 hours in, and they were still hitting me with tutorials. I don't know what was wrong with the idea of throwing up a text box that had the controls on it and then you move on. It also kinda stings a whole lot more after playing the other 3DS games that included the ability to fast forward cutscenes. That is simply not a thing here. Honestly, if Nintendo would have taken the time to patch that in after the fact, it would have done the game a world of good. And you wanna know the insane thing? There is one ability that doesn't give you a tutorial. I thought it crashed or something. Man, I got this new power and the game just let me play with it on my own. Why? It sounds like hyperbole when you say it out loud, but the tutorials constantly kill the pace of the game. While later uses of the mechanics are totally fine, and when the game lets you play at your own pace, it is great, but it would be a whole lot better if Dreambert would just keep his pillowy mouth shut. And just overall, while Dream Team is totally mechanically sound, there are so many of these little annoyances that keep popping up so constantly, it kinda muddies up the entire game. There are so many fetch quests in this game, regularly putting you in direct sight of your end goal, but oh man, we're missing the 5 things required to make this thing work, so just run around on these different points on the map to get them, that's fine. This actually happens quite often, causing most of these areas to feel like they're overstaying their welcome. Some of the puzzles, like this really stupid tile one, take way too long to solve, even though the solutions are incredibly straightforward. It took me nearly 13 hours of gameplay time for fast travel to finally unlock, which is absolutely ridiculous. While it can be fun to use, there is a bit too much reliance on the touchscreen for basic maneuvering in the dream world for my liking. Sometimes I want to just move from one platform to the other, but oh man, gotta jiggle the nose for a little bit first. And the same thing goes for some of the motion controls in the bros moves. A couple of them just didn't work as I would hope, and it caused me to not do as much damage as I wanted to, and I would just do a different move instead. In general, I feel like the developers really focused in on taking advantage of the 3DS's newer capabilities, rather than solely focusing on making the game fun first and foremost. I mean, when I found equipment that powers you up on your birthday, and one that increases power based on how many steps you took that day, okay, that's when I knew. Admittedly, at the time of its initial release, I remember not even thinking about any of the complaints that I have now. My old save file here has everything completed 100%, so clearly I just loved that we had a new 3DS game at the time. I also spent 40 hours in this game, holy cow, I surprised myself. So based on that information, what I think I would say is on its own, played in short bursts, a lot of the issues I mentioned earlier probably won't matter. But it's only when coming right off the heels of the previous games where the shortcomings are a whole lot more apparent. But what if I told you that by the end of the adventure, Phantasma gets fat? Aw, hell yeah, dude. Eventually, Phantasma and Bowser get their hands on the Dreamstone. Surprise, surprise. As their one major wish, they get a massive castle encased in an impenetrable field, and the only way to get through is to summon the Great Z-Keeper, a majestic, powerful, incredibly large and beautiful rainbow bird who is like incredibly chill, dude. Like, wow, what? I like him a whole lot. With a special beam of energy from the Z-Keeper, they succeed in breaking down the castle shield. And now it's time to enter Neo Bowser Castle. Probably named after Neo Bowser City from Mario Kart 7. That's nice, dude. I really like that track. Oh yeah, that's right. The Elite Trio are here too. Man, for being original characters based on Mario enemies, something similar to characters you would find in Paper Mario, these guys really don't get as much screen time as they should. They don't show up in the sequel either, so this is all we get from them. That's missed potential. And yes, we're traveling through Bowser's Castle once again, this time lacking much of the interesting theming all of the previous adventures had. Not a terrible final dungeon, I just missed the smiles of Fawful from Bowser's Inside Story and the cool implications of being in Peach's castle in Partners in Time. But soon enough, our heroes make it to the top of the castle for our final few encounters. Oh hey, look at that, Bowser's eating a lot of food. That's a reference? I think. First up, we got a giant Bowser battle. Again, big fan of these, and this is no different. Really fun time. The end of the battle is like Bowser and Luigi spinning a bunch, and you gotta knock each other off the field. It's like, what, I'm playing Beyblade now? Okay. Luigi, let it rip! And then we battle Phantasma, who is fairly difficult, I'll give him that, and it's in the dream world this time, so we get to use all those cool abilities. But man, I cannot get over it being so identical to the first 5 minutes of the game. That's so weird! Paper Mario 64 did do something really similar, but at least the first fight in that game is unwinnable, so it made sense, and it made the following encounter a whole lot more epic. Here, you kind of just use the same strategies that you used at the start of the game, just more. And there's this weird motion-controlled dodging minigame that you play to avoid some attacks, and that's not really fun, and it happens often, and that's... Man, it's not that good. But the real final fight takes place after Bowser foolishly eats the Dream Stone, transforming him into Dreamy Bowser. Despite just being a different form of Bowser for like the 4th time now, this is a really solid final boss. I mean, Bowser's basically a god in this one. It is slightly more intimidating than whatever Bowletta was trying to be. The music is fantastic. You got some massive attacks that are pretty difficult to avoid. You gotta take out both hands before attacking the center to deal the most damage. Oh, it's just like the Cackletta Soul fight all over again. Huh. Better than Partners in Time, though. A few good hammer swings later, Bowser blasts off again, and Peach is finally saved. Z-Keeper to the rescue as the castle crumbles under everybody's feet, and after touching down back on Pillow Island, he transforms the recaptured Dream Stone into a Dream Coin, spawning infinite money for all of the villagers to buy their wishes instead of simply relying on a mere object and hoping for them to come true. So the moral of the story here is money is the true key to happiness. The end of the game is... it's okay. As I said before, much of the game tends to drag on, and the build up to the final encounter isn't super strong anyway, so while the final battle is really cool, thanks especially to the sweet music, I was honestly more so relieved to have it finally over with rather than invested in what was going on and satisfied by what happened. The journey to get there can be pretty enjoyable at times, but I felt pretty drained by the time I got to the destination, unlike, again, Bowser's Inside Story. Okay, listen, I know there's been a ton of comparing going on here between these two games, but I can't help it. Alpha Dream did such a fantastic job with Bowser's Inside Story, and rather than having Dream Team feel like a proper evolution of the formula, it feels more so like they wanted to find a way to do a lot of the same stuff all over again without explicitly reusing the same ideas. The graphics and the soundtrack are top-notch. I do prefer the looks and sounds of the previous games, but it's hard to complain about what we actually have here. And when I look back at my time with Dream Team, I just remember an adventure that feels unnecessarily longer, filled with a ton of obtrusive tutorials. There was an antagonist that wasn't very intimidating, Bowser was a bad guy again, which I really couldn't take seriously, and the primary gimmick of Luigi going to sleep feels like it never met its full potential. We have a game here that is fun, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good things about this, but there is too much holding this game back from true greatness in my eyes. Patch in the ability to fast forward cutscenes, Nintendo. I know you don't care about the 3DS anymore, but come on. Come on. But in the grand pantheon of the Mario and Luigi series, I would probably put Dream Team right up there with Partners in Time. Not a bad game, but definitely near the bottom of the list. If you want to play it for yourself, it'll still be fun, but be prepared to have your hand held with tutorials the entire time. Dreambird needs to shut the hell up. But oh, you may be saying to yourself, what about the Game Boy versions? Released alongside the N64 and GameCube games, we got Mario Golf and Tennis on the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance as well. The simply titled Mario Golf and Tennis on the Color, and Advance Tour and Power Tour on Advance. And hell, not too long after Mario Tennis GBC released, we even got Snoopy Tennis released exclusively for the console as well. Tennis fans and Game Boy Color fans were eating pretty good in 2001, that's all I'm saying. If you wanted that tried and true gameplay experience but in the palm of your hands, well, you got it here. Both consoles, both sports, the core experience is all here. But as you already know, yes, each of these games also comes with a fully fledged RPG mode as well. I mean, hey, it was the reason to play these games in the first place. As a human character of your choice, you attend a golf or tennis academy in the effort to rise the ranks, gain experience points to put into specific traits and better yourself, and eventually go one-on-one against Red Luigi himself. And these modes are simply amazing. Don't get me wrong, it's not like we have these grand sweeping RPG adventures with all of the twists and turns and varied gameplay mechanics you would expect in the genre. This isn't Golf Story we're talking about here, but they're still really good. I love the idea of using a blank slate of a character as a means to sort of immerse yourself in this academy, bullying the other students and making them question why they even signed up in the first place. It's so satisfying. I will say though, the cast of characters in these academies, it's filled with some of the biggest nobodies I've ever seen. They would even go on to make some of these characters playable too. Oh boy, I can't wait to play as Flit. Should have taken the golf superstar Plum and put her in the tennis academy. That would have made a lot more sense. We would still be seeing the character to this day. You goofed up, Nintendo. You goofed up. You put your money on Flit, and no one cares about Flit. The champions in these two games are pretty cool though. Each of the two academies basically has a few boss fights that you have to get through before getting to the big Italian man at the very end. And I don't know, I always kind of saw them as like an Elite Four from Pokemon equivalent. I like that for this. And the icing on top of all of this, you could even transfer your characters to the console versions. You don't really see too many people talking about this feature nowadays because with the re-releases of the N64 games, people being nostalgic about the GameCube games, it's kind of just fallen by the wayside. But thanks to the N64 having a transfer pack, as well as the GameCube having the GBA link cable, you were able to take your characters, put them on the big screen, and it was so damn cool. Dude, the fact that your human character has their own trophy animation in tennis, that's amazing. That's me. That's me getting a trophy from Red Luigi. Oddly enough though, when we get to Power Tour, the final game of this Game Boy bunch, it's the only one where you can't transfer your characters to the console game. And there was never any explanation why either. It just kind of wasn't here now. Please buy the game anyway, I guess? E3 2015, aka that one time Nintendo used puppets for their game showcase. Oh, simpler times. I don't really think this is much of a hot take, but this was one of Nintendo's weaker E3 events in my opinion. Some solid games all around, but nothing much in the way of new announcements. Need I remind you, this is where they announced Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. I still don't think I've recovered from that. One of the bright spots though was the announcement of the newest in the Mario and Luigi series, a crossover with Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi Paper Jam. Dude, that's such a good idea! I know I just said I wasn't the biggest fan of Dream Team, but I was still ready for whatever this new adventure had in store. Crossovers are inherently really exciting. And the name Paper Jam? Aw man, even the name is perfect. The potential for this is immeasurable. The important word there is potential. Crossovers are just one of the most exciting things to happen in the video game world. You take two good things, you put them together, you get one really good thing. That's basic mathematics. But that's not what we got here. At this time, the Mario and Luigi series was riding high after Dream Team, and the 3DS in general was a console that was simply exciting to own. There were just so many great games you can play on it, a very stark contrast to when Dream Team released when the handheld was just getting out of its initial sales slump. Paper Mario, on the other hand, different story, but one that you're all familiar with. I won't bore you with the details. Sticker star bad. Yes, we get it. But it is important to this story, I promise. What was once a franchise filled with life, energy, original characters, and stories became a sterile version of its past self, resembling New Super Mario Bros. More than Paper Mario. So with this new crossover on the horizon, which Paper Mario are we gonna get? Well, we already know the answer to that question. Now we know Paper Jam as the final original game in this franchise, and despite being excited for it when it was new, I just couldn't bring myself to complete it. This is going to be my first time going through this game from start to finish. For some reason, back then, I couldn't get past the halfway mark. There's gotta be a reason for that. Alright, well, 2 games in a row, we are still lacking the bros yelling, Nintendo! 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 So that's a shame right off the bat. On the offset though, things are looking pretty good here. Mario and Luigi's art style may not be as pronounced as it was on the GBA and DS, but seeing the paper characters interact with everyone else, yeah, that's exactly what I bought this game for. Oh, and once again, it's still weird. While the game is known as Paper Jam in America, it is known as Paper Jam Bros in Europe. Why? It didn't really make much sense with Dream Team Bros, but at least there, the Dream Team are the Bros are the Dream Team, that's fine. Paper Jam Bros is 3 words they threw together and called it a day. One day, while Luigi and Toad were doing some spring cleaning, they come across a special book that, once opened, unleashes a paper company's worth of creatures from within and scatters them all across the land. This includes a bunch of structures, toads, Goombas, and other typical enemies. I can never look at a paper bomb the same way again after Origami King. No, I'm not ready to talk about it. Princess Peach, Kamek, Bowser Jr., Bowser, and of course, Mario. Shenanigans ensue. No Paper Luigi though, and I know exactly what you're saying. Paper Luigi would have been perfect for this. It makes so much sense. And you'd be right. more on that later. Our main goal at the moment, per Paper Peach's request, is to save all the paper toads. Simple enough. But soon after, our real motivation for the rest of the story presents itself. Bowser steals Peach. ×2. Honestly, as much as it's gonna sound like a cop-out, this is kind of the entire plot. There's no original villains, you occasionally have to save some toads every now and then, you work towards rescuing both Peaches, and by the end, you take out both Bowsers. That's it. The Koopalings do show up again. Yay? I don't dislike the Koopalings, in fact I would say I'm a big fan, but when they're thrown in because they couldn't really be bothered being creative, their presence is pretty annoying in my eyes. This was a similar issue in Color Splash as well. Admittedly, some characters do make their series debut like Nabbit and King Babam, which is kinda cool, but overall, yeah, this story is really bland. Humorous at times, usually when Paper Mario is using his paperness. That stuff's pretty good. The Year of Luigi gets a mention, a one-line mention. That was really cute. There's this one scene where Paper Peach escapes her cell by walking through it. That's probably the best part of the game, but otherwise the humor, much like Dream Team, is pretty subdued. We still get a bunch of gut punches to Luigi throughout though. Boy gets his own year and he is still the butt of everyone's jokes. That's not fair. Dream Team may not have been a storytelling masterpiece either, but at least there we did have an original villain with unique characters to interact with. That is non-existent in Paper Jam. And, well, we may as well get this over with. Bland is kind of how I would describe this entire adventure. Missed Potential is, unfortunately, the true name of the game here. Before Paper Mario enters the story, the battle theme is a remix of the one from Superstar Saga. That's pretty cool. Paper Mario and Friends coming out of a book is kind of a reference to Thousand Year Door and Super. At some point, Bowser's castle goes way up into the sky, which did also happen in Paper Mario 64, but I don't know, these are a bit of a stretch. Call me selfish, but I wanted more. Return to the Bean Kingdom and give Popple a more pronounced role. He has yet to be seen since he just ran off near the end of Dream Team. Maybe bring back classic partners for cameos, or maybe even the Star Spirits working with an ultimate power would totally fit right at home with Paper Mario. All those block people from the previous two games, gone. The Elite Trio, henchmen that were created exclusively to this sub-series, nowhere to be seen. Oh, but Starlow's here, having less to do with the plot than ever before. The disappointment here with what they could have done is pretty vast. And I still can't get over the lack of Paper Luigi. That is totally bizarre. His inclusion would have been perfect. He is the only one out of the two pairs of brothers that can speak full sentences. Apparently, him not being playable was due to the developers wanting to stick to a 3-button control scheme, one for each character, because 4 buttons would have been too difficult. I don't know, should we tell him? Regarding simply its crossover appeal, Paper Jam very much wants to be like Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, or Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright, games that combine elements from both series in an attempt to satisfy multiple types of audiences. But in reality, Paper Jam is more like Crash Purple and Spyro Orange, games that are trying to sell itself on its brand recognition above all else. And you never want to go full Crash Purple and Spyro Orange. This may be marketed as a crossover, but make no mistake about it, this is just another Mario and Luigi game, lacking all of the original flair that made the series special in the first place. Except this time, Paper Mario's there. In name only, but he's there. That's about all I can give it. But I will say, as disappointing as that aspect is, there is still a lot more to this game than just that. Regardless, we are 5 games into this series, a lot of which worked in the past still works now. Running around and doing some simple platforming and getting into action command-based combat is just as enjoyable as it's always been. There's also no extra side-scrolling gimmicks like in the last 2 games. The gameplay style that you start off with is the style you play most of the game with. There are some notable additions though. There's a really helpful dash, which is really nice because the worlds are otherwise super big and pretty barren to explore. There's a lot of special moves that you can activate by pressing the 3 bros buttons in order, like this one grabby move, going over gaps with a paper plane, nice little throwback there, I will admit, and drilling into the ground so you can climb up walls and collect beans. All 5 of these games have beans. You couldn't think of anything else? That's what the title of this game should be, man. Not Paper Jam Bros, but Paper Jam Beans. From time to time, there are also these Rescue Toad missions that you can take part in, and man, I don't know, these feel really unnecessary. They're not as big of a pace breaker as all of the previous game's tutorials, but it does suck when you're trekking along but you can't continue because, oh, we gotta stop and do some mini games to progress. They're okay at best, but every time I got into one, I just wanted to get back to the main game. And then there's the combat, where Paper Mario really gets to show his stuff. Nothing really exciting on the Mario and Luigi front. You jump and you use your hammer as your main forms of attack, with plenty of options for bros moves. You have no doubt played at least one of the previous 4 Mario and Luigi games before this. You have played this one as well by proxy. The Fire Flower has been fixed though, so that's a positive. Finally, the series can go back to triggering my early stage arthritis, one of my biggest issues with Dream Team. Overall, the new lineup of attacks that we have is pretty solid. They all serve different purposes too, so while technically they do get stronger the later on you receive them, I was still pulling out the attacks I got early on in the late game, so that is definitely a success. Listen, I love Bowser's Inside Story as much as the next guy, but really, a lot of the different moves in that arsenal got pulled out mostly if I just wanted different buttons to press at that moment. Also happy to report none of them use motion controls. Definitely do not miss those. So yeah, it's mostly the same for the 2 bros, but I still like what's on offer here. But easily, the star of the show here is Paper Mario, showing off a brand new copy mechanic where you can stack multiple Marios on top of itself to power up your attacks. He can also float for some reason. Okay, it is all a bit weird since, again, this has absolutely nothing to do with the games Paper Mario is from, but it does spice up the gameplay just enough to keep things exciting whenever it's his turn to make a move. He also comes equipped with a lineup of not bros attacks, but trio attacks, more cinematic affairs that require all 3 characters to activate, and as you would expect, usually dealing a lot more damage if performed successfully. Ultimately, this all makes for a very fun battle system. It's no longer one repeat system with the bros and a second fresher system with Bowser or Dreamy Luigi that makes the repeat system seem like it needs freshening up. Here, it's only one, and it's a good one at that. It's not all perfect. I feel like the enemy tells, indicators that tell you which characters are going to get attacked, are harder to distinguish than ever before, which leads to taking more hits than I felt were justified. This was one of the things the earlier games did so well. But really, that's not that big of a deal. Overall, it's still really fun, but a bit slow when it comes to some of the opposing attacks, if anything. You can also no longer customize where your final experience points go whenever you level up. This one is definitely a weird thing to remove. Leveling up does happen at a super constant pace for all 3 characters, so that's nice, but not having that extra little bit of customization that the previous 4 games had is a confusing choice. How I would describe it is the way Paper Jam utilizes 3 different characters is really fun, intuitive, and engaging, but again, the way it specifically uses Paper Mario is not. Sometimes he is nothing more than a cheerleader. Oh, but of course, if you thought that was the only battle system in this game, do I have something to show you? Of course, we had to have some other big gimmick to have an additional battle system, no matter what. While the previous 2 games had giant battles that were slower and required you to rotate the DS and 3DS 90 degrees, here we have giant papercraft battles. Thanks to Toadette and a bunch of the toads that you rescue along the way, these massive cardboard beasts get created for you to ride atop of and go to war. And they're just kind of okay. In these encounters, you run around a big 3D arena, ramming into and jumping on top of multiple enemies, all of which uses up some of your stamina, and to regain stamina, there's a rhythm minigame that you take part in whenever you desire. Each battle also introduces a new cardboard character to control, equipped with a brand new mechanic, like Papercraft Yoshi being able to use his papercraft tongue. So no 2 encounters feel that much alike, but I don't know, man. These do nothing for me. Similar to the Toad Rescue minigames, these feel pretty mindless. They come off as distractions for the sake of variety and nothing more. We didn't need something like this to keep the adventure interesting. The game itself was doing a good job of that. Guys, Paper Mario is in this game. We gotta have some battle gimmick that's kinda like Paper. It's definitely a mindset carried over from Sticker Star. Like those Toad missions, they're not terrible, but they're pretty unnecessary. As a whole though, the bright side on the entire game is the pacing of it. It is way better than Dream Team. All of that whack tutorial garbage is gone, and we also have the ability to fast forward cutscenes. Oh, thank goodness, this is the first game to introduce that. It is extra important since the story is as lackluster as it is. Good to know it's not a forced punishment to sit through this time around. As a result, you end up constantly being on the move. Rarely ever are you stationary. Well, except for Paper Mario at least, he's always stationary. It ends up being a bit of a toss-up between the two 3DS adventures. Which one did I have a better time playing? Dream Team certainly had better set pieces and more unique characters, but Paper Jam was more enjoyable with the moment-to-moment gameplay. The side content, though, is definitely lacking, I will admit. Doing every single Toad Rescue mission is optional. There's a few quizzes that you can partake in, which nets you just a few items and nothing else. You have the typical Bros Move challenges, as well as boss gauntlets, which does lead to a special final boss. Fancy there. But that's about it. Nothing substantial to really sink your teeth into. It's also a noticeably shorter adventure than Dream Team as well. It took me 7 hours less to get through this one. That really puts into perspective just how much a Dream Team was those damn tutorials. The reason I didn't beat this game all those years ago was due to that lack of original content, as well as the crossover fan service not appealing to what I wanted. But giving this game a second go, coming right off the heels of playing Dream Team, Paper Jam's positives shine a whole lot brighter. Oh, and just in case you thought things would pick up by the end of the game, let's just go ahead and squash that right now. No. Thanks to all of the paper toads that you end up saving, you're able to travel into the sky to Neo Bowser Castle. Yep. It's the same exact name they used last time. You got some pretty basic puzzles. You end up chasing Nabbit for like 30 minutes. That takes up most of your time here. There is a Mega Man styled boss rush with all of the papercraft bosses because, you know, I did say I love those. I couldn't wait to fight all of them again back to back to back. And after taking out both Kameks in a traditional boss fight, as well as all of the Koopalings, the final encounter is upon us. Bowser and Paper Bowser. Phase 1, nothing really too special here, both Bowsers at once. You got plenty of strong moves in your arsenal to handle them easily, no big deal. Phase 2 though, when the good music and all of the 3D modeling budget comes in, this is the true final battle. Shiny Robo Bowser. And honestly, it's an enjoyable fight. Although the pattern is pretty easy to figure out. Chip away damage to get the weak spot exposed, then go all in on those strong attacks before the shield comes back and you gotta do it all over again. And it also kinda goes without saying, this is the 4th and technically 5th time the ultimate battle in these Mario and Luigi games is an altered form of Bowser. We've done this before, nothing here is special. With enough bops to the head, Bowser blasts off once again from his castle. The heroes manage to send Paper Bowser back into the book he came from, and with that, it's time to celebrate. We cut to a parade. That's it. I blinked and then the credits started rolling. Just as bland as it was getting here, the ending, it just happens. Though I guess ending a game with the parade is another Paper Mario reference. But man, I am really stretching here. I got nothing else to work on. You do unlock a sound test though, so that's kind of cool. Oh. So yeah, that's Mario and Luigi Paper Jam. Definitely better than I remember it, but it's just kind of there. Upon its release, Paper Jam's reviews were positive, however, sales were below expectations, performing a lot weaker than the 4 games before it, selling better than only the 2 3DS remakes that released after it. Which is a bit of a segue to discuss the poor state Paper Jam sent Alpha Dream into. While they crafted a very fine game, they clearly lost a lot of their mojo from their earlier games that put their name on the map. Sure, Sticker Star suffered from a lot of that too, but it's hard to tell if Mario and Luigi's lack of creativity is anything more than a coincidence. Rather than giving it another shot with a new original story, a bunch of original characters, and a bunch of wacky things the bros could be doing, the company decided to go back to the past and remake Superstar Saga instead, with the assumption on my part that they were going to try and remember what made that game so memorable all those years ago. People may be a bit indifferent to the art direction, but I thought the Superstar Saga remake was really well done. Regardless, nostalgia couldn't save this one. It did not sell well at all. But hey, the Switch was on the horizon. Maybe the lessons learned and the money gained from this remake will help this franchise's jump to an HD console. That's not an outlandish thought. I mean, Fire Emblem kinda did that as well. And then we got a Bowser's Inside Story remake instead. And the company filed for bankruptcy soon after. Damn. It sounds cliche, but you hate to see it. Alpha Dream became a name that was worth caring about because they made a bunch of games that Nintendo handheld gamers truly loved. And they also made a handful of Hamtaro games. I cannot let that go unnoticed. This year, I wanted to dedicate time to playing through the entirety of the Mario and Luigi series, and now that we're finally at the finish line, I can happily say I did exactly that. Outside of those new side modes and the remakes, but they weren't really good anyway, so who cares? Because of this adventure I went on, I was fortunate to see all of the game's highs and lows in such a short amount of time. And looking back on it all, man, Mario and Luigi is such a good series. Paper Mario may have been thriving in those early years, but these games, these are the ones that carried the torch that Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo left us. These are the games that put our heroes in some of the wackiest of scenarios you could possibly imagine. Wrapped up in humorous stories, really engaging bad guys, super fun gameplay, it's awesome. Beans, babies, beans, Bowsers. Oh no, even more beans, some dreams, and did I mention beans? A whole lot of beans, just a whole bunch of beans. And also Paper Mario was there for a second. These 5 games may have lost some of the creativity as we got to the end of them, but they still did a lot. Mostly with beans. Did I mention that part? Alongside Luigi's Mansion, Green Mario finally had a strong enough spotlight on him to make him the endearing character that we know today. I would argue that is the biggest net positive of them all. And many of these games' accomplishments and failures will stay exclusive to history here. Papa will remain MIA until the end of time, I promise you that. These are definitely still adventures that are worth experiencing, and by doing so, the Mario and Luigi series will be remembered forever. And, well, since people are gonna ask anyway, before we sign off, I'd probably just rank all the games like this. Maybe a bit different than how you would do it, but hey, that's the sign of a good series. I would love to see how all of your rankings stand compared to mine.